Chapter 1689. If you want to convict someone, you should at least give them a chance to explain themselves. However, the person in front of her didn't give her a chance other than blocking her mouth. Gongsun Shui was angry and amused at the same time. She couldn't move or struggle. She was like a fish on the chopping board, and she could only let him do whatever he wanted. Xiao Yao didn't feel her struggle. He slowly reduced his strength from the beginning, and slowly turned from a violent charge to a gentle attack. During this period, he left her lips. She wanted to explain while she was sober, but he covered her again. Every time she wanted to open her mouth, he wouldn't allow her to say anything. In the end, she was addicted to his continuous attacks. At first, he was the one who took the initiative, but in the end, she couldn't tell who took the initiative. She didn't know how long this went on, but the two finally separated, panting. Gongsun Shui didn't think that she would let him do this. It was her first time being so intimate. At this moment, he was staring at her like a wolf, as if he wanted to eat her up. She felt her face burning. She reached out and pushed him. Her voice was low and hoarse. "Let me go. They couldn't go on like this, or it would be difficult to end it." "No." He stared at her stubbornly. "I won't let go." Every time he replayed the scene of Wei Yu leaving, he would be burning with jealousy. Yes, he admitted that he was jealous. He was jealous. He couldn't help but want to occupy her heart. He didn't want anyone to see her shy side. She rarely saw such a childish side of him. Was it stimulated by the alcohol? But thinking about what they did just now, he didn't look like a child at all. Gongsun Shui tried to calm her heartbeat, but she couldn't ignore the breath of the person in front of her. After the deep kiss just now, both of their clothes were messy. His clothes were open, and it was a little messy. Strands of hair fell in front of his forehead, but it couldn't cover his black and bright eyes. That pair of peach blossom eyes seemed to be able to speak. Their affection grew from shallow to deep, and it was like the fragrance of wine on his body. It was intoxicating. His lips were so red that they looked like they were dyed with rouge. Together with his reddened eyes, he exuded a charm, a devilish aura, and a carefree aura. These completely different feelings coexisted on his body, but they converged to form the most captivating appearance, enough to turn all living things upside down. In front of Xiao Yao, her snow-white skin was dyed with a blush. Her usual coldness was swept away and she revealed a delicate appearance. Her snow-white face was as delicate as a hibiscus, causing people's hearts to itch. Her clear eyes were filled with ripples due to her emotions just now. The light from outside shone in and lit up the expression in her eyes. All of a sudden, they were filled with a myriad of colors, sparkling brightly. He recalled the place where his fingers had just touched. Her skin was as smooth as silk, and his heart instantly yearned for it. His arms were on either side of her, pressing down on her sleeves while she pressed down on his clothes. His black hair was intertwined with hers, making it impossible to tell whose was whose. It was clearly the middle of winter, but the temperature in the room continued to rise, and the atmosphere became more and more ambiguous. She pursed her lips and pushed him again. "Let's talk things out. I can explain what you said just now." In the gap just now, she finally understood why he was angry. She wanted to explain so that he wouldn't misunderstand, but she still had to let him go first. However, Xiao Yao had already tasted the sweetness, so how could he let her go so easily? Moreover, it was obvious that he didn't want to listen to her and wanted to eat her up first. His body moved with his heart, and his hand had already touched her belt. Gongsun Shui's body stiffened, and she reached out to grab his restless hand. Her face flushed red. "You're drunk." "I'm not drunk," he retorted in a low voice. It was just that the wine didn't intoxicate him, but he was drunk on himself. "Get up first, then we'll talk." If this went on, things would definitely go wrong. She couldn't help but softly coax him again. If it was any other time, he would have been moved by her words, but Xiao Yao didn't fall for it tonight. In order to prove that he wasn't drunk, he leaned over again. However, in order to punish her, he bit her lips. His hand had already broken free from her hand and was roaming all over her body. Ever since Gongsun Shui was young, she had perfected her body and worked hard. She had never done anything between men and women, so when he anxiously lit a fire on her body, her entire body was in a blank state. Perhaps it was because the person in front of her was her sweetheart, so she didn't have any thoughts of resisting. Sometimes, when one's mind couldn't react, a person's subconscious actions would start from the beginning. Just as Xiao Yao was about to untie her belt, Qiu Feng's anxious voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Master, you're not asleep yet." This subordinate heard some noise and woke up to take a look. The two people on the bed were stunned by this sudden voice. Xiao Yao's hand froze, and he looked at the person on the bed whose clothes were half undone. Gongsun Shui didn't have time to look at his expression. Her gaze was a bit nervous as she looked at the door. The light outside reflected Qiu Feng's figure on the window. Her waist was slightly bent, and it could be seen that she was really anxious. She was about to reach out to knock on the door. "I'm fine. You should go and rest early." This calm voice made the person outside the door feel relieved, but it made the person beside her stare at her in disbelief. Hearing Qiu Feng's footsteps leave, Gongsun Shui's tense heart also relaxed. She let out a sigh of relief, but when she turned around, she met Xiao Yao's surprised gaze. She was stunned and then looked away, not wanting to look at him. She was a bit annoyed and a bit embarrassed. Suddenly, she felt his hand touch her face, and she couldn't help but look back at him. "Why did you do that just now?" Xiao Yao asked softly. If she opened her mouth to call for help, then Qiu Feng would bring people in and there would be no leeway between them. Gongsun Shui was shocked by his words. Actually, she didn't know why she did that either. Maybe she couldn't bear to see him get blamed. "I'm not telling you." It was rare for her to show her temper. The episode just now had already dispersed the smell of alcohol on Xiao Yao's body, waking him up from his drunkenness. Actually, his alcohol tolerance wasn't bad, but the smell of alcohol had gotten to his head, which was why he did such a thing in a moment of impulse. He silently tidied up her clothes and tightened her belt. Then, he threw himself onto the other side of the blanket and covered his face with his hand. He was dejected and blamed himself. Gongsun Shui was stunned by his series of actions. She turned her head to look at him. "Are you all right?" He put down his hand and turned his face to look at her. His eyes were slightly stung by her red and swollen lips. He didn't control his strength just now and hurt her. He felt that he wasn't a man. He reached out a finger and tenderly touched her lips. His gaze was as gentle as water. Gongsun Shui was stunned. The him in front of her didn't have the overbearing fierceness from before, nor did he have his usual frivolous attitude. Right now, he was serious and affectionate. It was as if she had become the most precious treasure in his hands. Suddenly, he reached out and tightly hugged her. His voice was as low as a spring. "I'm sorry." Chapter 1690. The moment he woke up and saw what he had done to her, he wanted to find a hole to bury himself in. However, no matter what he said or did, he could not make up for the mistake he had just made. Gongsun Shui was stunned by his sudden action. Sensing his guilt and self-blame, she slowly reached out and hugged him. He thought that she would be angry, scold him, or hit him. He did not expect that she would help him out and even hug him. Just as Xiao Yao was shocked, he heard her say, "I don't blame you." Gongsun Shui smiled faintly. How could she bear to blame him? It takes two to clap. If she had not unintentionally resisted and deliberately allowed him to do so, she would rather die than live in dishonor and not let him get close to her. If she liked him, she liked him. She just could not control herself. Xiao Yao hugged her even tighter. "I shouldn't have done that to you. I was wrong." Gongsun Shui stroked his back and said softly, "It's okay. I didn't get hurt. Besides, I was willing." As soon as she said this, she felt his whole body tremble. Then, he looked up happily, his attractive peach blossom eyes sparkling. "Really?" She had just blurted it out because he was too uncomfortable. She did not expect this guy to react so emotionally. She was a little regretful that her emotions had been swayed by him and she had said such shameful words. However, in the end, she acquiesced. Xiao Yao suddenly hugged her again, ecstatic. A woman is willing to bear the joy of fish and water with a man, which means that she likes him. Ice Beauty, you like me, don't you? The person who had been rubbing against her shoulder suddenly raised his head and said something that caught her off guard. She looked away unnaturally. What nonsense are you talking about? Get off me. She was lacking in breath. It was obvious that she was trying to cover it up. How could Xiao Yao not see it? He grinned and hugged her tightly. I won't let go, I won't let go. I knew you were the best to me. Wei Yu is not as good as me in everything. You can't look at her again. Gong Sun Shui already knew why this person had suddenly barged into her room tonight. She looked at the shameless person in front of her speechlessly. You're talking nonsense again. Wei Yu came over tonight to report something urgent. What are you thinking? So this was the truth. Xiao Yao was a little guilty. It seemed that he had been blinded by jealousy and misunderstood her. Okay, this is my fault. I shouldn't have misunderstood you. He lowered his head and reflected. However, as he spoke, he remembered the guard's words and immediately looked up. Wait, I heard that Wei Yu is your childhood sweetheart. This can't be false, right? Gong Sun Shui didn't expect him to know about this, but she didn't think it was a big deal. She said, the Wei family used to be my father's confidants. After my father left, he asked the Wei family to take care of me. Wei Yu was sent to me at that time. She hid her identity and helped me build my reputation. Hearing this version, Xiao Yao couldn't help but feel jealous again. Childhood sweethearts, sharing weal and woe, starting a business together. This kind of relationship was hard to surpass. He really treats you differently. Gong Sun Shui couldn't help but laugh at his jealousy. What are you talking about? There's nothing between us. Moreover, Wei Yu has a fiancé. Don't ruin their marriage. Hearing this, Xiao Yao was finally relieved. He couldn't help but hug her and rub her shoulder. I know you treat me differently. I'm so happy. He returned to his usual coquettish and cute self. Gong Sun Shui sighed in relief. This guy was finally normal. Okay, I know what you want to know. Go back. It's late. I'm sleepy. Ever since her hidden illness acted up, she hadn't had a good night's sleep. She had been tormenting him for a long time. Now she was sleepy. They had just talked about a lot of things. Although the Ice Beauty didn't admit her feelings for him, her expression and behavior couldn't lie. How could he bear to let her go at such a moment? No, I'm not going. You sleep. What about you? I'll watch you sleep. Gong Sun Shui really lost to him. People could really be shameless to this extent. She looked at him wrapped around her like an octopus. She really wanted to kick him off, but when she saw his satisfied smile, she suddenly felt greedy. One must enjoy life to the fullest. Don't let the golden cup face the moon empty. Forget it. In the last bit of time, she would treat herself and him better. Thinking that he wouldn't do those embarrassing things again, she closed her eyes in peace. Xiao Yao looked at her with infatuation. He had already sobered up and his impulses had receded. How could he do anything to her? The best time should be on the wedding night. He kissed her and smiled with satisfaction. Ice Beauty, after you and Jean Xian's competition, I'll go and ask for your hand. I want to marry you. Gong Sun Shui, who had her eyes closed, was shocked. She couldn't recover for a long time. Her heart was filled with sweet and bitter feelings. Xiao Yao looked at the sleeping face in front of him. He felt that he couldn't get enough of it. After a long time, he gradually fell asleep. When she heard the sound of steady breathing beside her, Gong Sun Shui slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were filled with tears. She reached out and touched his face. She smiled, but her tears fell. I thought that the most difficult time of my youth was the greatest injustice given by the heavens. But after meeting you, I realized that the abyss between us is the cruelest injustice given by the heavens. I really want to reply to you and say that I'll wait for you. But those secrets that I can't tell you are stuck in my throat. I can't say that from the bottom of my heart. Love is separated by mountains and seas. The mountains and seas cannot be reconciled. She raised her head and kissed the corner of his mouth. Swallowing the bitterness, she finally closed her eyes. Sorry, I can't respond to your love. It was a dreamless night. When Gongsun Shui woke up, she found that the other side of the bed was empty. But the traces of sleep proved that everything that happened last night was not a dream. She rubbed her forehead. Qiu Feng came in with water. Sect Master, you haven't slept for such a long time. I'm really happy. Hearing this, Gongsun Shui curved her lips. Maybe it was because his scent was too nice, or maybe it was because her heart was very calm with him around. That was why she had a good night's sleep. Indeed, I feel refreshed. Qiu Feng happily helped her wash up. Gongsun Shui looked at the sun outside the window and asked, "Where is Qingyu?" "Waiting outside. Ask him to find out where Sect Master Murong is. I want to see him." Qiu Feng was confused. The competition is tomorrow. Why does Sect Master want you to see him today? What if he tries to do something? Don't worry, I know what to do. Go. Qiu Feng couldn't disobey Sect Master's words. While worrying about Sect Master's health, he turned and left. Chapter 1691. Today, everyone discovered one thing, that is, Xiao Yao's mood was very good. Wasn't he smiling while eating, drinking tea, chatting? It was as if nothing could attract his attention as he sat there in a daze, grinning foolishly. The retired emperor couldn't stand it any longer and slapped him. "Stinky brat, I told you to smile, 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 what are you smiling for?" Xiao Yao rubbed the bump on his head, still grinning as he replied, "I'm not telling you. Anyway, it's a good thing." The retired emperor looked at Xiao Su worriedly. This child couldn't have turned silly, right? Xiao Su shook his head, indicating that he didn't know either. In another courtyard, Jean Xian had just finished chatting with a few of his confidants when an unexpected person appeared in front of him. Sect Master Gongsun. Jean Xian was slightly surprised. And the people around Jean Xian instantly held the sabers at their waists vigilantly, as if as long as there was something wrong with the other party, they would pull out their sabers. Gongsun Shui's gaze swept across those people's hands and finally landed on Jean Xian, her voice faint. "I was just passing by when I realized that Sect Master Murong was here, so I came over to say hello." The corners of everyone's eyes twitched. You really passed by quite a distance, already passing through half of the residence. Jean Xian raised his hand to dismiss them. "I see, please take a seat, Sect Master Gongsun." Originally these two people were like fire and water, but unexpectedly they could sit together peacefully. If people from both sides saw this, their eyeballs would probably pop out. The tea was served. Gongsun Shui didn't let anyone test for poison, just picked it up, lifted the cup lid, stirred the tea leaves floating on top and took a sip. Seeing her unguarded, Jean Xian couldn't help but raise his brows. "Sect Master Gongsun, aren't you afraid that I'll poison you?" He didn't ignore the nervous expressions of the attendants following beside her. "I believe that Sect Master Murong is a magnanimous and upright person, and wouldn't stoop to such lowly acts." Gongsun Shui put down the teacup and looked at him. Jean Xian smiled. "Thank you for your trust." At this point, the atmosphere was a little cold. Although the two of them had heard of each other's deeds, today was only the second time they had met. Jean Xian was also a man of few words. For a moment, he had nothing to say and didn't know where to start. It was Gongsun Shui who spoke first. "I heard that you've lived outside for more than 10 years. This topic caused the Japanese to glare angrily. If it wasn't for the Yu clan's tricks, how could their young clan leader be wandering outside? Jin Xian was not angry because of this, nor did he feel that it was embarrassing to mention this matter. Yes, in order to avoid being hunted down, I had no choice. Gong Sun Shui sighed softly. Life outside must not be easy. In the beginning, yes. But after meeting my master, everything started to get better. Jin Xian looked at her and suddenly said bluntly, "Don't you know all this?" This morning, he received news that Protector Chui was drunk and talking nonsense. After investigating, he found that the Yu clan had appeared during this time. Connecting the two, he had an answer. Gong Sun Shui was not embarrassed at all. There were Japanese and Shao clan people everywhere. It was not easy for her to hide her actions from them, but she did not care. As long as she achieved her goal, it was fine. Some things are one thing to hear and another to hear from the person involved. Hearsay is not as true as the real person. Jin Xian raised his eyebrows. This person really dared to talk. What do you want to know? He didn't believe that she came here just to chat. Gong Sun Shui seemed to have seen through his thoughts and said innocently, "I just came to chat with you to relieve boredom. It's quite boring to stay in the courtyard all day." Autumn Maple, who was standing behind her, heard her sect leader's words and had the illusion that the sun rose from the west. There were so many memorials on the sect leader's desk, and she read them until late last night. Jin Xian did not comment. Thus, for some reason, the two started talking about his life in the Sichuan. Because it involved a lot of political matters, Jin Xian basically skimmed over them and focused on his life in Jiangnan and his fief. At the end of the conversation, Gong Sun Shui said with some emotion, "Madame Xiao is a good person." Jin Xian smiled and nodded. "Yes, my mistress is my benefactor. I suddenly feel that your life in the Sichuan is very comfortable. Coming here is a grievance for you." Gong Sun Shui's eyes flashed slightly. Her emotions were unclear as she said this. Jin Xian's expression was rather helpless. If not for all these things, perhaps I would not have come to North Korea. Perhaps I could have lived a peaceful life. As soon as he finished speaking, Gong Sun Shui stood up. The shadow of the trees cast on her body, obscuring her expression. She said, "After chatting for so long, it seems that it's almost time for dinner. I won't disturb sect leader Murong any longer. Goodbye." Jin Xian did not expect her to leave so soon. He was reluctant to see her go, but he still stood up to send her off. It was a pleasure chatting with sect leader Gong Sun. I hope there will be more opportunities like this in the future. Alright, see you at the competition tomorrow. Gong Sun Shui nodded, then turned and left with her people. The Japanese had been keeping an eye on Gong Sun Shui and the others for a long time. Their bodies were tense, and they didn't expect that Gong Sun Shui and the others were just here to drink tea and chat. Looking at the group of people walking away, they were confused. Jin Xian watched the snow-white figure gradually disappear into the distance. A strange feeling lingered in his heart. He had only met her twice, but he had a feeling of regret that he hadn't met her earlier. He had always been a man of few words, but when he sat with her, he found that he wanted to say a few more words to her. He couldn't help but want to get closer to her. He had never felt this way before. He was momentarily at a loss. Was it because this person's political views were very similar to his? He did not have an answer. Gong Sun Shui, who left the courtyard quickly, felt like she was running away. She walked back to her courtyard with light steps and waved the people behind her away. Chiu Feng knew that she had fallen ill a few days ago, so he did not dare to stay far away from her. Chiu Feng saw that she was holding onto a tree trunk with a dazed expression, as if she had lost her soul. He could not help but worry. Gong Sun Shui stared at a certain point in the sky. Her heart was at a loss. She had been confident in every step of the plan. But today, she had heard so many things from the past. She saw in his eyes the yearning for freedom, the yearning and anticipation for life in the Sichuan. She was greatly shaken and began to reflect on the situation she had set up. She had considered everything, but she had forgotten one thing. whether or not he was willing to enter the game. Only now did she realize that she had been too selfish. Selfishly, she felt that everyone should take responsibility for their own fate and return to their original path. But not everyone was willing to return to their original position. She was wrong, but it was too late. Moreover, she had no other choice. Whether he was willing or not, this path had to continue. There was a metallic taste in her throat. She pursed her lips and spat it out. Chiu Feng had been nervously watching the person under the tree. Suddenly, he saw her bend over and spit out blood. His entire body shook. Sect Master. Chapter 1692. Sect Master, you've been like this for a few days. We can't delay any longer. I'll go find the high priest right now. Chiu Feng said with a sobbing tone. She was scared out of her wits. Gong Xuanxue leaned on her and grabbed her hand. Her voice was firm. Don't tell anyone. But. Chiu Feng shook her head. Gong Xuanxue smiled with pale cheeks. Don't you know my illness? If the high priest had a way, he wouldn't have stayed in his room for the past 2 days waiting for news. The light in Chiu Feng's eyes dimmed. Sect Master was right. The high priest had been searching for a famous doctor for the past half a month, but to no avail. Are we just going to let you get worse every day? Even so, Chiu Feng couldn't convince herself to just watch and do nothing. After spitting out the blood, her chest felt much more relaxed. She used Autumn Maple's arm as support to stand up. I know my own body best. If there's no way to solve this hidden illness, why should I let more people worry and make them worry? Seeing that Chiu Feng still wanted to say something, Gong Xuanxue shook her head and stopped her. Tomorrow is the competition. Do you want to destabilize the army? We don't only have the Japanese as an external threat, we also have internal problems. No matter what, we can't make any more mistakes. Hearing this, Chiu Feng bit her lip and nodded. Sect Master, I didn't think it through. Gong Xuanxue was relieved to see that she had convinced Chiu Feng. At this critical moment, they couldn't make any mistakes. Otherwise, all her efforts would be for naught. She patted the back of her loyal subordinate's hand. Don't worry. If I can live, I won't give up any chance. Let's get through this crisis first. I cherish my life more than any of you. After all, I still want to see the Yu clan prosper and the people live in peace. Chiu Feng's eyes reddened again. I understand. I won't be a burden to the Bamboo clan. I only hope that after this incident, you can come clean with the high priest and stop hiding your illness. Gong Xuanxue rubbed her head. Okay. Chiu Feng was relieved to see the sect master agree. She helped her into the house. Gong Xuanxue looked at the blue sky before returning to the house. The weather should be good tomorrow. The next day. The arena for the competition was set up in Luocheng's drill ground. Chu Qingyan, Shao Su, and the other important officials of the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan were all seated on this platform. The other 2 platforms were for Gongsun Shui and her trusted aides. They were placed at the 2 ends of the drill ground, which was equivalent to the rear of the battlefield. It was convenient for them to give orders, and no one would be able to spy on them. Because the 2 sides had already discussed the content and method of the competition, the first chess match began very quickly after the 2 sides met. Chess battles used people as chess pieces and soldiers as formations. Not only did it test the intelligence and farsightedness of the players, it also tested their decisiveness in killing. It was the best way to test a person's wisdom, patience, and perseverance. Gong Xuanxue was well versed in the art of war since she was young. Although she had never led an army in battle, she was not an armchair strategist. She applied all her knowledge to the imperial court. Otherwise, she would not have been able to slowly control the imperial court from a puppet sect master. She gained real power and forced Suyu into a corner. But in the end, he still fell into her trap and could not make a comeback. However, she did not leave any traces behind. Most people thought that Su Yu's greed was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant, which was why he brought about his own destruction. In fact, as long as one knew a little about politics, they would be able to detect the secret of this woman's methods. She was terrifyingly smart, and not only was she smart, she was also extremely patient. Perhaps even men could not be like her, calming down and using 3 to 5 years to set up a trap. Therefore, she was not inferior to experienced veterans. Jin Xian was needless to say. He had been by Chu Qingyan's side since he was young. Chu Qingyan never did things according to common sense, so Jin Xian was naturally even more unrestrained. When he used schemes, he could sometimes cut in from tricky angles that others could not think of. This was a great advantage for him. Because he was Chu Qingyan's most valued subordinate, Xiao Su would give him pointers when he had the time. Sometimes, 10 years of study was not as good as a teacher's pointers. What could be more valuable than the personal experience of a general on the battlefield? When he was 10 years old, he had more than one master by his master's side. Shaolai cavalry's men who came back from the blood-soaked Azura field were all his masters. They taught him too many things that he could not learn from others. Moreover, in order to have the capital to settle down in this world, in order to live up to his master's expectations, and in order to be able to protect his master, he had put in a lot of hard work in many aspects. He had been in the imperial court and had been through many trials and tribulations on the battlefield. His temperament had been tempered to become more and more stable with each passing year. It was also because of this that he was able to shoulder everyone's burden when they set foot in North Korea this time. True knowledge came from practice. This was what his master had told him. He used the Japanese's counterattack this time as a test for himself. If there was something wrong, he would correct it. If there was nothing wrong, he would work even harder. Now, he did not dare to say that he was invincible, but he could at least be a general. Thus, a man and a woman, who were about the same age, held chess pieces in their hands. Their gazes were like torches as they coldly and mercilessly played chess. There was a huge chessboard on the spectator stand. Once someone from each side placed a piece, someone would place the piece on the board so that everyone could see the situation of their game. The Emperor Emeritus, who was usually lively, was sitting quietly in his chair. He stroked his beard as he watched the situation on the stage. Father Chu watched the soldiers below the stage draw their swords and fight. He scratched his head and asked, "They're fighting so fiercely. Can you tell who's winning and who's losing?" The Emperor Emeritus smiled and shook his head. "I can't tell at the moment. Miss Gongsuan's chess play is steady and meticulous. Jin Xian's moves are sly and unexpected. It's only been a while since they started. Slowly watch, this will be a matchless game." Father Chu felt that there was nothing interesting about watching the black and white chess pieces on the stage. He was more interested in watching the battle below. Because everyone on the stage was watching attentively, it was relatively quiet. Thus, she also heard her grandfather's words. She nodded in agreement. Gongsun Shue's chess play was indeed steady. She looked at all 3 moves as she played. Sometimes, when you saw that she seemed to have placed a dead chess piece, you would forget about it after a while. Later, you would realize that the chess piece had come back to life. It turned out that she had unknowingly set a trap for people to fall into. No wonder even Big Ice Cube said that this person was a rare talent. However, Jin Xian was not bad either. He had his own way of playing. He seemed to be charging around recklessly, but in reality, he had already set a trap for people to jump into. These 2 people were like 2 foxes. Smart and cunning. Everyone was looking forward to seeing who would win next. Chapter 1693. Time passed bit by bit, and the cups of tea on the table were changed one after another. The chess game was not over yet, but it was gradually coming to an end. Those who understood the art of war could see that both sides had entered a stalemate. Unlike the swift and decisive moves they had made at the beginning, the following 2 people had to think for a while before placing a piece. However, everyone present was patient. There were civil officials and military generals among the spectators. To them, this chess battle was very rare. Some of the soldiers' eyes shone brightly. They felt that after watching this match, they would benefit a lot more than reading a few military books. As long as one had the heart, they would be able to learn a lot. After all, this was a rare match between experts. Just as the retired emperor had said, this was an unprecedented chess battle. Chu Qingyan looked at Xining, who was clutching her handkerchief nervously, and couldn't help but smile. She reached out and patted the back of her hand. Don't be nervous. Your family's Jin Xin has been through hundreds of battles. He won't be defeated so easily. Xining was comforted by her master, and her heart relaxed. In front of her was Xiao Yao, who had been staring intently at the chess game. She didn't think much and said, "Don't worry. For your family's ice beauty to be able to sit in this position, her ability shouldn't be underestimated." After saying that, she suddenly felt that something was amiss. Xining and Xiao Yao looked at her at the same time, their gazes somewhat aggrieved. It was Xiao Su who couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled her hand and shook his head with a smile. "According to what you said, this game won't be able to determine the winner." Chu Qingyan was embarrassed. That was indeed the case. After all, she couldn't bear to see these two people lose. She wailed and fell into his arms. She really didn't know who to support. Xiao Su caressed her face. "Just watch the match. Don't think too much. You can't change the situation." When Chu Qingyan heard that, her gaze turned from Xining and Xiao Yao to the two sides of the table. Her gaze was filled with helplessness. Yes, they could coexist peacefully in private, but in a real situation, they were shouldering different expectations and responsibilities. Thus, she couldn't force anything. She could only hope that things wouldn't get worse. Just as Chu Qingyan was lost in thought, the game ended. A calm and clear voice without any regret came from the stage, "I've lost. Sect Master Murong is indeed a young talent. I accept my loss wholeheartedly. Sect Master Gongsun is too humble. I was just lucky." The conversation between the two sides ended the game. Chu Qingyan looked at the chessboard in a daze. The black pieces were almost all eaten up, and the white pieces occupied most of the land. Gongsun Shui was black, and Jin Xin was white. The Sun Moon tribe and the Sun Moon tribe had different expressions. The Sun clan was elated, wild with joy. The Moon clan was completely silent, their mood gloomy. The unimportant spectators, on the other hand, expressed that they enjoyed watching this chess battle to their heart's content. No wonder it was a battle between the two supreme rulers of the two races. They had not been looking forward to it for so long. The two sides met in the stands. Gongsun Shui looked at the young and handsome face in front of her and smiled sincerely. "You played very well. This is the first time I've played so much." Jin Xin cupped his hands in greeting. "Same here." The Sun clan and the Moon clan were like fire and water on the stage. Neither side was willing to give way to the other. Now that they saw their sect master talking to the other side so amiably, they were confused. Did they walk into the wrong place? Originally, the second round of the competition was to follow, but when Jin Xin was talking to Gong Sunxue just now, he noticed that her face was slightly pale, so he moved the competition to 2 hours later. Both sides had no objections, so the two sides returned to their own resting areas and waited for the second round of the competition. Gongsun Shui vomited blood as soon as she returned to her tent. Her entire body was sore, and she leaned against the back of the chair. Qiu Feng was so scared that she was about to cry again. She opened her eyes with great effort and smiled helplessly. "How come I didn't know you could cry so much before?" Qiu Feng sniffled. "You're so sick now. How can I bear to watch? I just used too much of my brain just now. My body can't take it anymore." That's right. Playing chess was an extremely exhausting thing. It was said in the books that extreme wisdom leads to injury. She was probably trying to prove this saying right now. Qiu Feng begged, "Then what should we do? There's still a game later." Why don't we call it off? Gong Sun Shui shook her head. What nonsense are you talking about? Do you know what the consequences are if we call it off? That's admitting defeat. Am I the kind of person who gives up without a fight? But, Qiu Feng still wanted to say something, but she was stopped by her. Don't worry. I've already made preparations. Go and get the bottle from the wooden box. Qiu Feng didn't suspect anything and immediately ran over. She opened the wooden box that her master gave her this morning and took out a plain bottle. Although she was a little curious, she immediately handed it over. Gong Sun Shui poured out a black pill from the bottle and swallowed it. Qiu Feng immediately served her water. She drank 2 mouthfuls of water and closed her eyes to rest for a while. Her face quickly became rosy and healthier than before. Her tiredness was swept away. When she opened her eyes again, her eyes were bright and clear. There was no trace of illness at all. Qiu Feng had been watching her closely. When she saw this scene, she was surprised. Master, this medicine is so magical. Your complexion is much better now. What medicine is this? How come I've never seen it before? Gong Sun Shui smiled calmly. Of course it's a good medicine. This medicine could help her quickly recover her strength and suppress the hidden illness in her body, showing her best side. However, it could only last for a few hours. Once the medicine lost its effect, her body would deteriorate very quickly. It would be even more serious than before. After all, it was a medicine of the tiger and wolf. But she had no other choice. Qiu Feng didn't notice the sadness that flashed through her eyes. Joy appeared on her face. Then this subordinate wishes sect master a victory in the next battle. Gong Sun Shui smiled. Because of her defeat just now, the people of the Yu clan were in a panic. The high priest brought people to calm them down, which gave her a moment of peace. She closed her eyes and thought about many things. Only when the gongs and drums sounded did she open her eyes. She changed into neat clothes and lifted the curtain to walk out. Xiao Yao walked up and down in the stands. Because their identities were more sensitive, he couldn't go backstage to cheer her on. He could only wait anxiously for time to pass. When the time of the competition approached, he looked up at the tent of the Yu clan and saw her lift the curtain and walk out. He rarely saw her wear anything other than a silk dress. Last time, she had sent a letter of challenge to Jin Xian. That snow blue robe had stunned him. Now, she was wearing a snow blue robe. Under the sunlight, the sword at her waist reflected a cold light. It made her already cold temperament even sharper like ice. Everyone in the field was stunned, but they didn't dare to get close. They were afraid that they would blaspheme this snow lotus that seemed to come from the heavenly mountain. She walked out slowly. Her aura was grand and solemn. Even Chu Qingyan couldn't help but sigh. What a domineering queen. Xiao Yao's chest surged with pride. It was as if he was the one being praised and felt honored. Look, this was his person. His future princess consort. Not only was she as beautiful as a flower, but she could also protect the country. Just as he was immersed in his happy fantasy, the second round of the competition began. Chapter 1694. The battlefield had been cleaned up. Now, the two of them stood in the middle and cupped their fists at each other. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Whether it was in the stands or below the stands, no one dared to speak loudly. They stared unblinkingly at the two people below the stands. This was not a simple competition. It concerned the future of the two clans. The high priest had just comforted the officials. When he returned, the competition was about to begin. He did not have the chance to meet the sect master. Now that he saw her as usual, he was relieved. The sect master had told him not to worry. He did not expect that they would lose the first battle. Even the calm high priest could not help but sweat. However, he could not panic. The officials were watching. He had to be the strongest shield for the sect master. Moreover, the sect master had been taught by an expert. She had a high chance of winning. Thinking of this, he was slightly relieved. In the stands, Mr. Chu was very troubled. If one side was someone he didn't know, Father Chu would definitely bring Howling Chi back to their old business and perform an earth-shattering cheering dance. Unfortunately, he knew both sides today. He propped up his chin in distress as he watched the duel below. However, Chu Qingyan felt that her father should not do it again. Back then, she was embarrassed by him and wanted to finish the competition as quickly as possible. The referee made the rules clear. No one was allowed to hurt anyone. The two of them, who carried the hopes of many parties, looked at each other and nodded. The referee left and the competition officially began. Gong Suanxue used a sword. Jin Xian also used a sword. When both sides drew their swords, everyone felt that the atmosphere had instantly turned cold. Even the howling winter wind had stopped. Because his opponent was a woman, Jin Xian could not take the initiative to attack. Gong Suanxue knew what he was thinking. She raised her sword and attacked him. When the two swords collided in midair, the clang sound seemed to have struck everyone's eardrums, and the sound lingered in the air. But soon, the two of them started to attack fiercely. Every move was fast. The sound of the collision became more intense. The crowd could not help but hold their breaths. One of them was like a dragon, smooth and flowing. The other countered every move with an imposing aura. For a moment, it was difficult to distinguish between them. That's a good move. She can attack from that angle. She's so fast. The Moon Clan fan said. Her reaction speed is unparalleled. Not only can she block the opponent's unexpected move, but she can also counterattack. That's amazing. The Sun Clan fan said. Cheng Yenluo sighed. I didn't expect Miss Gong Suanxue to be so skilled. As a woman, I'm ashamed. Kong Ling comforted her, it's okay. Everyone has their own strengths. Your medical skills are excellent, so others can't envy you. Xiao Yao, who was at the side, also quickly joined the Moon Clan's camp and became a fan of the Ice Beauty. His future wife was not only as beautiful as a flower, but she could also protect the country and fight with swords. In the future, she wouldn't need to be afraid of others bullying her. Gong Sun Shui didn't know what he was thinking. If she knew, she would probably roll her eyes at him for being so shameless. Gong Sun Shui looked at the long sword on the ground and slowly withdrew her hand. She smiled at the person standing in front of her under the sun. Everyone present was silent for a moment. As the saying goes, the person lives with the sword and dies with the sword. So Gong Suanxue lost. Gong Sun Shui smiled faintly at Jin Xian, I lost. Jin Xian cupped his hands. Thank you for letting me win. Jin Xian didn't know why, but he had an illusion that the person in front of him was smiling brightly. She looked relaxed, as if something had been lifted from her shoulders. When he looked at her again, she had already turned and walked towards the spectator stand. The Ri people cheered and immediately surrounded Jinshin, congratulating him. Gong Suanxue heard the excited laughter behind her and smiled lightly. But soon, she calmed down and walked towards her officials who were silent and didn't know how to react. She walked up to the high priest. I've lost. I've disappointed you. Lan Si gripped his cane tightly and said word by word in disappointment and pity, Sect Master, what did you promise this old man before? I didn't want you to do this, but what did you say? Looking at his sad eyes, Gong Suanxue sighed and said, High Priest, I didn't lie. I won't go back on my words. Lan Si didn't believe her, but seeing how determined she was, he was confused. Sect Master, what are you playing at? I'm confused. You'll know soon enough. Gong Suanxue smiled at him and walked up to the spectator stand. Gong Suanxue's loss was reasonable, but also not reasonable. After all, when two tigers fight, one will be hurt. Xiao Yao stood at the wooden ladder and watched her walk up. His face was full of pity. He opened his mouth but didn't know how to comfort her. She was a woman, but she had to bear a heavy responsibility that even a 9-foot man might not be able to bear. His heart ached for her and he wanted to go up and hug her. Gong Suanshua smiled at him. You don't have to say anything. I feel your heart. At this time, she saw Jinshin walk up the stage and walk to the center of the stage. The two kings met. It was time to fulfill the promise. The climax of the competition was here. However, everyone suddenly thought of something important. One of the Sun officials said in an unfriendly tone, Sect Master you didn't mention the stakes when she declared war. The Yu officials, who were originally crestfallen, looked up in unison. That's right, the two sides only talked about the content of the competition, but didn't mention what the stakes were. Chu Qingyan and the others were stunned. That was indeed the case. However, when Gong Suanshua declared war, her intentions were clear. She did not want the people to suffer and the people to lose their homes. What she meant was that the two of them would have to fight each other. However, there was no black and white agreement, nor was there any mention of the stakes. If the Yu clan did not admit it, then this competition would have been in vain. Jin Xan frowned. He thought of this as well. The Yu clan smiled happily. The Sun clan was furious. The situation became tense. There was a strong smell of gunpowder in the air. It was as if a war was about to break out. At this time, Gong Suanshua spoke to break the silence. The stakes were set on the day of the competition. What? Everyone didn't understand. Jin Xian looked at her in surprise. He waited for her to continue. If I win, the Sun clan and Yu clan's grudge will be written off. The Sun clan will return the Yu clan's city and we will mind our own business. Someone from the Sun clan shouted. Then what if you lose? The quiet and powerful voice spread throughout the drill ground. If I am not skilled enough and lose, then the Yu clan will be mine. The Sun and Yu clan will be mine. I will step down and there will be no more Sect Master Yu. Chapter 1695. If my skills are not good enough and I lose, then I will give up the Moon clan's empire. The Sun and Moon clan will be one family. If I step down, there will be no more Sect Master of the Moon clan. These words were powerful and resonant, but they were like a bolt of lightning that exploded in the crowd. Not to mention the Moon clan, even the Sun clan felt that this surprise was like a tornado. Jin Xian was also shocked, but before he could react, the Moon clan's camp was the first to disagree. Sect Master, you can't do this. Yes, Sect Master, how can you give up the empire? Gong Suanshua, our Moon clan doesn't have such a weak Sect Master. The Moon clan doesn't have such a useless leader. There were more and more objections, and the scolding became more and more unpleasant. Although Lan Si and the rest were also shocked by her actions, they were still her people and tried to persuade the ministers. In a court, there were many camps and many factions. There were endless internal conflicts, but it was also a way to maintain the court. However, once they lost common interests, they would unite, just like now. High Priest, why are you still speaking up for her? If you don't have the ability, don't take on the porcelain job. If you don't have the confidence to win, why do you still want to issue a challenge? You're obviously giving the empire away. Sect Master might have her own difficulties. The Sun clan is so arrogant. If she doesn't do this, the flames of war will continue. Let's fight. We can't allow the empire to be handed over to someone with a different surname. We can't coexist peacefully with the Sun clan. The hatred between the Sun and Moon clan can't be resolved. That's right. I thought that the Sect Master could lead us to prosperity like the previous Sect Master. I didn't think that the Moon clan's foundation would be destroyed in her hands. If the previous Sect Master was still here, he would be angered to death. The objections became more and more intense. Even if there were people who spoke up for Gong Suanshua, they were quickly drowned out by the anger. Chu Qingyan and company saw this and could not understand Gong Suanshua's actions. Actually, such a bet that was not set up properly could be denied. What's more, from the looks of it, this was Gong Sunshue's decision alone, and no one else knew about it. This made them even more confused. Xiao Yao looked at the ice beauty who was being criticized by everyone and his heart ached. He strode forward and stood beside her, holding her hand as if this was the only way to support her. When she said this, she had already expected the result, so she wasn't too surprised. However, Xiao Yao didn't hesitate to stand by her side, which made her feel a little touched. It turned out that when everyone was pointing fingers at her, there was someone who could stand by her side despite the abuse. This feeling was really good. Are you alright? What can I do for you? Gong Sunshuo felt that if there was anything in this world that she could not bear to part with, it would probably be the person beside her. At this time, when the Japanese heard the Yu people's insults, they woke up from their shock and joined the insults. You make it sound like we're robbing you. It's clearly your sect master who lost to us. Luckily sect master Gongsun knows what's good for him. Otherwise, we would have besieged the city tomorrow and your empire would have been ours sooner or later. What do you mean people with different surnames? Why didn't you say this when you took over our empire? Don't just let the officials do whatever they want but not the common people. At first, it was just the Yu people arguing, but now that the Japanese were involved, the two sides began to fight. The civil officials were arguing, while the generals rolled up their sleeves and prepared for a big fight. Because Jin Xian and Gongsun Shui were smart enough to only bring a few hundred officials, the two sides retreated far away from the city, so it didn't cause too much chaos. But even so, the situation was getting out of hand. Jin Xian saw the public's anger and wanted to ask Gongsun Shui to make a new bet. For example, the two sides would not attack each other for 50 years, but the Japanese officials were already red in the face. He was afraid that if he said that, he would suffer the same fate as Gongsun Shui. He would be considered a traitor, so he could only swallow his words. His gaze turned from the audience to Gongsun Shui. To be honest, he really couldn't see through this person. No one would be so generous as to give up their empire. Chu Qingyan was a little worried that these people would explode and destroy the stage. Some people had already started fighting. If she wasn't pregnant and didn't have to worry about hurting herself, she would have clapped her hands and cheered for these people. This was the first time she had seen so many adults who didn't know martial arts fighting. Xiao Su reached out to protect his little wife. His brows were tightly furrowed. With so many people gathered below the stage, it would be difficult for him to take the little one away safely. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have listened to her suggestion and brought her to watch the fight. Seeing the situation getting worse, Xiao Su said coldly to Gongsun Shui, "Are you still not going to clean up? It will only get worse later." Xiao Su's words of reprimand stopped in his throat. When he saw Gongsun Shui standing there calmly as if everything was under control, the anger in his chest subsided by half. For Xiao Yao's sake, he wouldn't embarrass her. Otherwise, he would directly summon the Shaolai cavalry and tie up these troublemakers directly. This was a small matter, he could still do it. Hearing this, Gongsun Shui looked in the direction of Xiao Su and saw that everyone was looking at her with different expressions. She thought that her actions just now must have frightened them. Feeling that the time was right, she nodded and then motioned for Xiao Yao to let go of her hand. Xiao Yao received the message in her eyes. Although he was reluctant, he still respected her and took a step back. However, he still stood by her side, using his actions to tell her that no matter what happened, he would protect her. Gongsun Shui saw that the situation was about to get out of control and her anger had reached its peak. The time was ripe. She stood on the stage and suddenly spoke. Using her internal energy, she spread her voice across the entire drill ground. "Everyone, please don't be impatient. Quarreling won't solve the problem." This person's voice was like the spring rain that was silent and immediately extinguished most of the people's impatience. Those who could hold their own in the imperial court were of course smart. Just now, they were just impulsive. Therefore, they stopped their uncivilized actions, tidied their clothes, straightened their hair, and waited for Gongsun Shui's next words with a serious expression. "I heard your protests just now. The most problematic thing is that I gave the country to someone with a different surname, which is Lord Murong. I can't agree with this. When Gongsun Shui said this, many people were at a loss. Did the Lord take the wrong medicine? Did she know what she was talking about? Someone said disrespectfully, could it be that the Lord has taken a fancy to that pretty boy Murong and is ready to enter his harem? So she abandoned her family and country and is willing to be a concubine? As soon as this person finished speaking, his chest was hit by a stone and he fainted from the pain. Xiao Yao clenched his fists. Daring to slander his wife, did he think that he was dead? However, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. The minister's words made everyone understand Gongsun Shui's abnormality today. Was it really like this? The more and more people looked at her, the more suspicious Xiao Yao felt sorry for the ice beauty standing in front of him. He wished that he could take the blame for her. However, Gongsun Shui smiled and was unmoved. Instead, she threw out an even bigger stone and stirred up an even bigger wave. The reason why I said this is very simple. It is because the blood of the Gongsun family flows in Lord Murong's body. Chapter 1696. Not only were the members of the Sun tribe and the Moon tribe stunned when they heard that, but everyone on the stage was stunned as well. Especially Jin Xian, he looked at Gong Sunshui in shock and disbelief. At this time, Gong Sunshui's gaze also fell on him, her eyes full of sincerity. Jin Xian came to his senses, and his expression darkened. He sounded a little annoyed as he said, "Sect leader Gong Sunshui, I hope you're not joking. Even if you want to stabilize the situation, you don't have to do this." Many of the officials from the Moon tribe agreed with him. They wanted her to not lie to them just to make them accept the fact that the Sun tribe had annexed them. Otherwise, they would elect a new sect leader and remove her from her position. Gong Sunshui smiled faintly at Jin Xian. "I'm not joking, cousin." Many people were stunned when they heard her call him cousin. Was Murong Yunxian really related to the Moon tribe? Cousin? Xiao Yao raised an eyebrow. Before Jin Xian could say anything, Gong Sunshui turned around to face the officials from the Sun tribe and the Moon tribe. Her voice was like an ancient bell that reverberated in everyone's hearts. Murong Yunxian is indeed my cousin. His mother is called Gong Sun Yan, and she is my father's older sister. As soon as he finished speaking, the noisy audience suddenly became dead silent. Gong Sun Yan? Could it be Princess Gong, who has been missing for decades? But didn't she fall off a cliff? How did she become Murong Yunxuan's mother? No, the Sun tribe and the Moon tribe were at war with each other. How could she be related to the Murong tribe? Chu Qingyan and the others felt like there was too much explosive news for them to handle. However, as a qualified spectator, they still had to play their part and wait for the main character to solve the mystery. Jin Xian was just like everyone else. He was filled with questions. However, his question was, how could his mother be the princess of the Moon tribe? Sect leader Gong Sunshui, I hope you don't make up stories. Jin Xian tried his best to calm down as he spoke to Gong Sunshui in a serious tone. Gong Sunshui sighed softly. I never joke, and I definitely won't make up stories about things like this. She took a deep breath and slowly revealed the secret from back then. Gong Sun Yan was skilled in both civil and military matters. She was the most outstanding princess in the Yu sect back then. The old sect master had already decided to let her become the next sect master. It was a pity that her third brother Gong Sun Jing, who was Gong Sun Fei's father, did not want her to inherit the position of sect master. Before passing on the position, he devised a scheme and ordered people to pretend to be bandits to cause trouble. At that time, Gong Sun Yan was in the prime of her youth and wanted to make more contributions. Hence, she volunteered herself and fell into the trap. At that time, it was too late to react. She was forced down the cliff and her whereabouts were unknown. Thus, when everyone thought that the pearl of the generation had passed away, Gong Sun Yan was saved by the passing young sect master Murong, who was also Murong Yunxuan's father. However, at that time, Gong Sun Yan was seriously injured, and it was already half a year later when she woke up. At that time, something happened to Gongsun Yan, and the old sect master suspected that Gongsun Jing was the culprit. At that time, he did not have any evidence and could not investigate openly. After all, family scandals should not be aired in public. Thus, he secretly imprisoned Gongsun Jing and let him hang himself to protect his identity. After losing his beloved daughter and son, the old sect master fell ill and could not recover. In a short few months, he passed the position of sect master to his second son, who was Gongsun Shue's father. Then, he passed away. Thus, when Gongsun Yan woke up, everything had changed. She blamed herself for causing her father's death. However, at this time, the situation in the court had already been decided. A new sect master had ascended the position. She was also crippled of her martial arts and her body was weak. At the same time, she fell in love with Murong Yunchuan's father. Thus, she acquiesced to the rumors. Because she knew that once she appeared, the courtiers who supported her would definitely stand on her side. Then, it would make things difficult for her second brother, who was born of the same mother. Thinking that her second brother's ability was not inferior to hers, she felt assured and handed the Yu clan to him. Thus, she changed her identity and abandoned her identity as Princess Xian. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. At that time, Gongsun Jing bribed the person who delivered the medicine and faked his death to get away. He also learned of Gongsun Yan's whereabouts and told Suyu about it. However, Gongsun Jing was still exposed. During the pursuit, he accidentally fell off his horse and died. Because the old master's order was a secret, it didn't affect Gongsun Jing's wife. That was why the disaster was buried. At that time, Gongsun Jing's wife was also a ruthless character. She plotted a conspiracy with her father. First, she got rid of Gongsun Shue's father and held the power in her hands. When she learned that Murong Yunchuan's father was fond of beauties, she catered to his fancy and used others to send him countless beauties. She secretly sent a mole into the Murong manor. In the end, that was the source of the Murong clan's tragedy. It was also the beginning of the Sun clan's total destruction. What happened after that, everyone present knew. The story Gongsun Shue told was full of ups and downs. Not only did she reveal the secrets of the imperial family, but she also revealed the truth of the war between the Sun clan and the Moon clan. This series of news shocked everyone present so much that they could not react for a while. Because many people present were witnesses to the events of the past, when Gongsun Shue talked about the past, they could relate many things to it. But these things were too coincidental and too unbelievable. After many people digested the news, their first thought was that it was all made up and could not be trusted. How could there be so many coincidences in the world? Chu Qingyan tried to pry off her big ice cube's hand and pinched the flesh on his arm. She asked stupidly, "Does it hurt?" Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. "I can tell you with absolute certainty that this is not a dream." Chu Qingyan sighed. "I thought that this kind of dramatic story only existed in novels. I didn't expect it to be real. No wonder people say that novels originate from life, but they also surpass life." Xiao Su did not comment. Jinxin did not doubt her like the other officials who questioned her, because the things she said happened to coincide to some extent with the signs his mother showed when he was young and got along with her. For example, his mother once said that her hometown was the capital of the Sun clan. For example, his mother knew martial arts and knew how to rule a country. For example, his mother once told him that he had a cousin. If there was a chance in the future, she would bring him back to meet his ancestors. Those memories came back to him as Gongsun Shue spoke. He could not help but stare blankly at the person standing not far away. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity when he first saw her. Gongsun Shue had already expected that even if she told the truth, many people would not believe her. So she threw out her trump card. "Everyone, there is no need to argue. I have a witness here. If you don't believe the witness, I have material evidence." Everyone instantly fell silent, waiting for her evidence to be presented. She curled her lips. "Wei Yu, bring her here." Chapter 1697. Lan Si had been so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth when his sect master had said that shocking secret. Now that he saw her call Wei Yu up, everything seemed to have been calculated. He stared dumbfoundedly at the ink-haired woman in snow-white clothes on the stage, suddenly understanding what she had said before. So that was what the successor meant. His sect master would not be muddle-headed when it came to important matters. Although he was very unwilling to let Jiang Shan merge with the Sun clan, he could not drag his sect master down at this time. Thus, Lan Si immediately said a few words to his aides and told them to go down and persuade the court officials. At the very least, they could not let them ruin their own people's stage. Just as Lan Si was about to move, Wei Yu had already brought someone up. That person was covered in filth and looked extremely pathetic, but there were still people who recognized him. Isn't that Elder Su? It's actually Su Yu. When Turan, Huo Ling, and the others heard this name, they immediately gripped their weapons. Their eyes were like torches, as if they wanted to stare a hole through that person. This person was the main culprit who hurt Feng Ling. It would not be too much to cut him into pieces. Soon, Wei Yu brought her people up to the stage. Su Yu felt the killing intent from the stage and couldn't help but shrink his neck and kneel down obediently. Gong Suanxue gave Wei Yu a look. Wei Yu understood and said to the people on and off the stage, "Everyone is not mistaken. This person is Su Yu, the one who plotted to kill Princess Chang and took over as sect master Gong Suanxue. In the end, he betrayed the Moon Clan and started the war between the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan. Su Yu, you were also below the stage just now. Do you have anything to add to the things I said?" Gong Suanxue asked coldly. Su Yu wanted to checkmate her at this time, but unfortunately, Wei Yu had given him poison before he went up on stage. If he dared to lie, then what awaited him would be a life worse than death. Moreover, his wife and children would die without a burial ground. When he thought of this, he did not dare to disobey. "That's right, everything you said is true. Princess Chang's death, your father's death, they were all planned by me. It's a pity that I let this brat escape back then. Even when I sent people to Sichuan, they did not eliminate you completely. This is my only failure." When Su Yu said this, he glared fiercely at Jean Xian. With that said, Jean Xian remembered that the person who had chased him all the way to the Sichuan was none other than the person in front of him. Jean Xian narrowed his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that the person in front of him was still a little useful, he would have turned him into ashes to avenge his mother and master. Sensing the cold killing intent coming from Jean Xian, Su Yu was so scared that he shrunk his neck back. Then, like spilling beans, he spilled out all the bad things he had done. As the person involved, Su Yu naturally spoke in detail, leaving no loopholes. Even those who wanted to talk nonsense could not find any flaws. Moreover, the things that happened back then were not without clues. The old officials who supported Princess Chang's ascension to the throne were still in the imperial court. They had long suspected Princess Chang's sudden disappearance. Now that Su Yu's details matched up, many people's eyes turned red and wanted to tear him apart. After Su Yu spoke a lot, Wei Yu also took out the letters he had secretly contacted back then. These letters spanned more than 10 years. Some of them were already yellowed, while others were still very new. They had his seal on them, so they could not be faked. Not only were the crowd amazed, but there was also probably no case that could have such detailed witness and material evidence. Apart from the crowd, Su Yu looked at Gongsun Shui in horror. "When did you get these letters? I clearly remember that they were burned. Could it be that she had already planted a spy in his identity?" Su Yu suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. How shrewd was this person? She even managed to fool him. Gongsun Shui smiled coldly. She did not want to talk to him anymore. She waved her hand and had someone take him away. At this point, the truth was already set in stone. With such conclusive evidence, no one dared to doubt it anymore. Gongsun Shui glanced at the different expressions on the crowd's faces and curled her lips. Then she waved her hand and had someone bring a bowl filled with water. There was a dagger on the plate. The bloodline of the imperial family cannot be recognized carelessly. Otherwise, the ancestors will not be at peace in the underworld. Therefore, to eliminate everyone's concerns, I will do one last verification. Blood identification. Once these 4 words were said, everyone expressed their approval. Jin Xian looked at the woman slowly walking towards him, a touch of softness in his eyes. In fact, there was no need for blood identification. He already believed that the person in front of him was his sister. But since it was something she wanted to do, he would go along with it. I'm sorry. In order to shut everyone's mouths and prevent people from making a fuss about this matter in the future, I came up with this once and for all method. I'm sorry you have to suffer. Gongsun Shui sincerely apologized to him. Jin Xian smiled and shook his head. It's okay. As he spoke, he took the dagger and made a cut on his finger. Soon, a drop of blood fell into the water. Then, he handed the hilt of the dagger to her. Gongsun Shui took it and made a cut without hesitation. Xiao Yao, who was used to seeing bloody scenes, was extremely distressed at that cut. After a drop of blood fell from her finger, he hurriedly took her hand and sprinkled the medicine he had prepared on her finger. Gongsun Shui could not dissuade him and let him go. Chu Qingyan, who had only seen blood identification on television, came over curiously. Although many people in the modern era doubted this practice, after living here for so many years, she was still in awe of many ancient practices. It's fusing. It's fusing. Chu Qingyan exclaimed. The 2 drops of blood floated in the water. Soon, they attracted each other and fused together. When Gongsun Shui saw this, she waved her hand and had someone take the bowl away so that the officials of the Sun Clan and Moon Clan could take a look. After a while, when no one objected, Gongsun Shui clasped her hands behind her back and spoke in a cold voice. Murong Yunxuan's identity has been confirmed. He is indeed Princess Luo's son. Princess Luo, my aunt, was supposed to be the successor of the clan leader. Now, I am simply returning the position to its rightful owner. After today's competition, everyone can see that Murong Yunxian is skilled in both civil and military matters. He has Princess Luo's demeanor. He will do a better job than I do in the Moon Clan. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan have been in constant conflict for the past 100 years. Now that such an opportunity has appeared and such a successor has appeared, it is a blessing for the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan have always been one family. Perhaps this is the guidance given to us by the gods. The Sun Clan and the Moon Clan should put aside their grudges and mend their relationship. The blood of the Murong clan and the Gongsun clan flows in Murong Yunxuan's body. With the blood of both clans, he will be the future leader of the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan. No one could refute Gongsun Shui's words. Because no one could refuse such an outstanding leader. Everyone bowed their heads in unison. Greetings, Leader Murong. Gongsun Shui felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She bowed with the others. She had finally achieved what she wanted. Chapter 1698. Jin Xian had just digested the news that Gongsun Shui was his sister when the news of him becoming the leader of the Sun and Moon clans came. He subconsciously wanted to reject this identity, but Gongsun Shui did not give him the chance. She waved her hand and asked Wei Yu to present the seal of the Yue sect, as well as all the items that signified the Yue sect's sect master. He looked at Gongsun Shui, who was already prepared. Her clear eyes were filled with expectations and pleading, making it impossible for him to reject. He could only agree. Everyone returned to the residence amidst the cheers of the 2 clans. Because Gongsun Shui had been surrounded by Lan Si and the others the moment she arrived at the viewing platform, Chu Qingyan and the others only met her after they entered the residence. Gongsun Shui knew that they had many questions to ask her, so she went to the meeting hall as soon as she entered the residence. Everyone was still discussing what had just happened. Once they saw her enter, they immediately quieted down. Miss Gongsun, I didn't think that you would be Jin Xian's sister. This turn of events is too unexpected. Chu Qingyan went up to her when she entered. She was both surprised and happy. Yeah, why didn't you tell us back then? You made me worry about you for so long. Xiao Yao also moved closer, his face full of grievance. Gong Sun Shui saw that everyone treated her like an outsider and was a little touched. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, I had no choice. Chu Qingyan hurriedly waved her hand. It's all right. I thought that Jin Xian had no relatives in this world. Now that he has a sister like you, it's simply too great. But when did you find out about this? Everyone fell silent as they waited for Gong Sun Shui's answer. Because this question was also what they were puzzled about. Gong Sun Shui's eyes flashed. She wanted to dodge the question, but Jin Xian was also looking at her with shining eyes. He must be very curious as well. She thought about it and sighed in her heart. Then she slowly confessed, I also found out when cousin returned to the Sun Blaze sect and sent people to investigate his identity. Everyone was shocked. Didn't she already know? Then why didn't you tell him back then? Jin Xian stood up and walked in front of her. His expression was very solemn. She knew that if she told the truth, everyone would definitely have such doubts. She clasped her hands behind her back, a helpless expression on her face. At that time, the Yu clan was plagued by internal and external troubles. In addition, the trap I set for the Su family had yet to be closed. Every step was arduous, and I had no time to meet you. So, I hope you can understand. Xiao Yao chimed in from the side, the ice beauty is right. Don't look at how the Yu clan has submitted to her now. In the previous period, the imperial court was extremely chaotic. It's all thanks to her that we managed to turn the tide. Otherwise, it would have been too difficult for the Yu clan to maintain stability under the natural and man-made disasters. Gong Suanxue looked at him helplessly, then said to Jin Xian, don't listen to his nonsense, it's not that exaggerated. But it was really quite chaotic at that time, and I felt that I couldn't take care of the Japanese, so I couldn't take care of them. You were able to take care of them, so you did me a big favor and did a good thing for the people. Jin Xian reluctantly accepted this reason, but he thought of something and frowned again. If that's the case, why set up a competition? The two of us can openly reveal our identities, why do you have to do something so superfluous? Seeing that he had asked this question, Gong Suanxue's expression became a little evasive. I also want to compete with you, to see if Aunt Chang's son is as outstanding as she was back then. Jin Xian nodded, then thought of something. No. If you want to compete, we can do it anytime, anywhere. Why must the Sun clan and the Yu clan be the stakes? And how do you know that I will definitely win? Today on the spectator stand, the things that she had asked Wei Yu to present could not have been so complete if she had not prepared them beforehand. How could the leader of a clan carry those things around with her? Unless she had already predicted that he would come to Luocheng, and that she would lose. If she continued to evade, these questions would only increase. Gong Suanxue met the questioning gazes of the crowd and sighed softly. Just like what I said at the drill ground today, because the hatred between the Sun clan and the Yu clan runs too deep, we need an opportunity to resolve it. However, opportunities are also created by people. If we do not reveal your identity in such a way, the officials of the two clans will not easily believe us. Furthermore, after everyone has witnessed your abilities, when you ascend to the throne, there will be fewer objections. Jin Xian asked again, but why are you so sure that I will take over the position of leader? Gong Suanxue looked at him with a determined gaze. Because if the Sun clan and the Yu clan do not have any objections, the person who becomes the leader must be able to convince them wholeheartedly. Your abilities do not need to be mentioned, and your identity as the son of the previous leader of the Yu clan, and as the current leader of the Sun clan, you are the best candidate. Jin Xian was speechless. He felt as if she had missed something. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind, and he looked at her blankly. Wait, I remember now. When I was fighting with Su Yu's army, the bridge they used to retreat suddenly collapsed, and their escape route was cut off. I've looked into it. That bridge was man-made. Did you send someone to do it? And last time, their rations were mysteriously lost. That was also your doing, wasn't it? Gong Suanshua looked into his eyes and smiled. It was me. As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd was once again shocked by her shocking words. Chu Qingyan understood that Gong Suanshua had planned all of this a long time ago. Perhaps when Jin Xian and Siyu fought, or even earlier, Gong Suanshua had already started planning. Who would have thought that a woman who was not even 20 years old would have such courage and ability? It was simply amazing. Why did you do this? Xiao Yao was also stunned. If she had not intervened, the Japanese would not have attacked here so quickly. What was she thinking? He felt that he could not understand her at all. At this point, Gong Suanshua felt that she might as well confess everything. She looked at Jin Xian and said seriously, I've been thinking about this plan for several years. I can't watch the Su family control the court and North Korea fall into poverty. If you hadn't appeared, perhaps I wouldn't have put this plan on the agenda and would have implemented it in a few years. Perhaps this is an opportunity given by God to unify North Korea and stop it from falling apart. That's why I sent someone to help you. In fact, with your ability, it's only a matter of time before you win, but I can't wait that long. Jin Xian was in disbelief. He did not expect that she would silently drag him into the trap. He asked the last question. Since you're so smart, why didn't you unify North Korea yourself? Instead, you gave the position to me. Gong Sun Shue's heart skipped a beat when she heard this question. She had finally asked this question. She opened her mouth to say something, but suddenly, her vision began to blur. In a daze, she seemed to hear Xiao Yao's panicked screams. She might not be able to hold on. Chapter 1699. No one expected Gong Suanshua to suddenly vomit blood and collapse. Xiao Yao, who was the closest to her, was the first to react. He reached out to catch her tottering body, his expression panicked. Ice Beauty, what's wrong? Don't scare me. However, the person in his arms had already lost consciousness and fainted. No matter how he called out, there was no response. Xiao Su was the calmest. As soon as this happened, he immediately said, Second brother, take her to the room. Huling, go to Feng Ling and call Ethereal and Yen Luo over. Xiao Yao immediately reacted. He pushed away Chiu Feng and the others who wanted to help him and directly carried Gong Suanshua to his courtyard. Second young master Xiao, where are you taking our sect master? Our high priest is coming. Chiu Feng shouted twice. When she realized that he had already left like a whirlwind, she couldn't care less and immediately followed after him. Although the situation between the Sun and Moon clans was very clear, Lan Si still couldn't accept the Murong clan unifying the two clans. So when Gong Suanshua went to the meeting hall, he didn't go over. However, he didn't expect to receive news that something had happened to her in such a short time. He staggered over with his people. Ethereal and Yen Luo arrived at the same time. When Lan Si saw that they were about to take the sect master's pulse, he waved his hand and signaled for the imperial physician beside him to come forward. Our sect master's illness must have flared up. This is the physician who has treated our sect master over the years. Ethereal and Yen Luo looked at each other. Since he was the physician in charge, he should be more familiar with the situation. Thus, they retreated and allowed the physician to take her pulse. Xiao Yao pulled the physician to the bed and anxiously urged, Quick, take a look. She's been unconscious ever since she vomited blood. The physician didn't dare to delay. He put down the medicine box and reached out to take her pulse. As soon as he felt her pulse, he revealed a shocked expression. What's going on? Why is our sect master's illness so serious? It shouldn't be. She should be able to drag it out for at least half a year. Everyone held their breaths and waited for the result. They didn't want to hear this bad news. Xiao Yao was stunned. He didn't care about the fact that they could drag it out for at least half a year. He directly grabbed the physician's lapel and shouted angrily, What do you mean? What's her situation now? The doctor was already old and couldn't take the sudden move. He couldn't breathe and his face turned red. Fortunately, Xiao Su was there. He reached out and grabbed the doctor's wrist. He said sternly, "Second brother, let go." Xiao Yao was extremely flustered in his heart, but after hearing his imperial brother's words, he regained a bit of his rationality and hurriedly let go of his hand. After the doctor was released, he coughed and gasped for air. Not only was Xiao Yao flustered, Lan Si also walked in front of the doctor in disbelief. "Lord Lu, what do you mean by this? What's wrong with the sect master?" Everyone present had a higher status than Dr. Lu. Moreover, this was an urgent matter, so he did not dare to delay. "If I'm not mistaken, sect master has already begun to fall ill 10 days ago. More importantly, sect master seems to have taken some kind of medicine, which caused his condition to worsen. Now, his body is beginning to dry up." Chiu Feng, who was standing at the side, almost went limp when she heard this. She cried and said, "Before today's competition, the sect master took some medicine. He said it could restore one's body to its peak condition." Lan Si angrily rebuked, "Nonsense. Why didn't you stop him? Moreover, sect master's condition is so serious. There must be something wrong with her daily life. How did you take care of her?" Chiu Feng knelt heavily on the ground, tears streaming down her face. Sect master did not allow this subordinate to spread the news. She said that after everything was over, she would properly nurse her body back to health. This subordinate was negligent. This subordinate is guilty. Jean Xian stared blankly at the pale woman on the bed. So today, he was not mistaken. She really was holding on. He had just found out that he had a younger sister. Was he going to lose her again? At this moment, Xiao Yao saw the painful expression on that snow-white face. His heart ached and he reprimanded everyone. "Now is not the time to pursue responsibility. Lord Lu, no matter what method you use, hurry and save her for me." Although Dr. Lu did not know who he was, some people were born to be kings. His every move revealed an aura that ordinary people did not have. Dr. Lu could not help but feel fear. He immediately obeyed his orders and began to administer the medicine. Dr. Lu took out a bottle of medicine from his medicine box and fed it to Gong Xuanxue. After a while, that pale face regained some color, but it was only a little. However, the pain on her face lessened by quite a bit. Xiao Yao's heart was just about to relax when he was stunned by Dr. Lu's next words. Dr. Lu stopped and turned to Lan Si, saying in a sorrowful voice, "High Priest, you also know that sect master's illness has been acting up more and more frequently in recent years. Even so, the medicine we developed can still suppress it. However, this time, I'm afraid it won't be able to suppress it. At most, it can only alleviate the pain. However, the illness will continue to worsen." Lan Si's expression changed abruptly. "Don't tell me she doesn't even have half a year left?" Dr. Lu looked at the person on the bed and shook his head heavily. "At most 3 months, but it's also possible that at any time." These words were like a stone thrown into a calm pool of water. The ripples caused by these words shook everyone's hearts for a long time. This bolt from the blue stunned Xiao Yao completely. Impossible. She was still so young. How could she only have 3 months left? How could she possibly die at any time? Xiao Yao thought of something and let go of his hand. He turned around and pulled Ethereal to the bed. "Ethereal, your medical skills are excellent. Quickly take a look and see if they're telling the truth." Ethereal didn't dare to refuse. He sat down on the spot Dr. Lu had vacated and felt her pulse. After a moment, he withdrew his hand and glanced at Yen Luo. Yen Luo received his signal and immediately went forward to feel her pulse. However, in the end, the two of them looked at each other and shook their heads at Xiao Yao in unison. Xiao Yao couldn't accept this result. He couldn't help but take a step back. Is there no way? Ethereal looked at the person in front of him sympathetically. It's not much different from what Lord Lu said. Miss Gongsuan's body is gradually deteriorating like a flower in autumn. As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at the person on the bed. It was hard to imagine that this beautiful girl's body was deteriorating like a withered flower. Xiaoyao walked slowly to the bed. Ethereal and Yen Luo stood up and made way for him. He sat down on the bed with his back to everyone. His voice was as cold as water. "Get out, all of you get out." Xiao Su frowned. He wanted to say something, but when he saw the situation, he knew that no matter what he said, he wouldn't listen. In the end, he took the lead and walked out of the room. Ethereal and Yen Luo followed closely behind. Lan Si and the others didn't want to leave, but leaving too many people in the room wasn't good for the patient. In the end, they left in grief. Jean Xian stood by the bed for a while. In the end, he clenched his hands and closed his eyes. He walked out with a heavy expression. Only Xiao Yao and Gongsun Shui were left in the room. Xiao Yao looked at the person on the bed. He reached out and caressed her face. He tried to smile, but his eyes slowly turned red. "Ice Beauty, are you joking with me?" Chapter 1700. The person on the bed remained unmoved, quietly sleeping. If not for those diagnoses, Xiao Yao would have thought that his Ice Beauty was just sleeping, and that everything would be fine when the sun rose. His hand moved from her face to her head, caressing her black hair. His eyes were red, but he became even gentler. "It's alright, isn't it just an illness? There are medicines in this world for all illnesses. We're not afraid, I'll cure your illness." No matter what he said, the person on the bed did not respond. However, it seemed that if he did not say anything, he would feel uncomfortable. In the end, he held her hand and spoke more and more. If Gong Sunshui was awake, she would have noticed that his hand was trembling. That was because he was trying his best to suppress the fear in his heart. He said so many words, seemingly to comfort her, but in fact, he was also convincing himself. "Ice Beauty, the outside world is so beautiful, I haven't taken you to see it yet. Do you still remember the big plate chicken I told you about last time? I was planning to take you to eat it." He said in a daze, not knowing what he said. It was as if that was the only way he could feel better. In the end, he pressed his face against the back of her hand, murmuring deeply, "Ice Beauty, wake up and look at me, okay? Don't leave me, okay?" He did not know if the unconscious Gong Sunshui heard these words, but Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan, who were standing outside the door, heard them. Because Chu Qingyan was pregnant, she did not dare to squeeze in during the chaotic situation just now, even though she was anxious. She only came to visit now, but she met the people who were chased out by Xiao Yao. Everyone else had left, leaving only her and Big Ice Cube behind. The voices inside were not loud, but the two of them had profound inner strength, so they heard every word. "Is it serious?" she asked the person beside her with a worried expression. Xiao Su nodded. Ethereal said that the illness has entered the heart, and the life force is constantly flowing away. She may wake up today, or she may fall asleep forever in the next moment. Chu Qingyan widened her eyes. "Is there no way?" "No." Xiao Su's low voice continued to ring out. She felt a lump in her throat and threw herself into Xiao Su's arms. Her voice was sorrowful as she said, "How could this be? I thought the clouds had parted and the moon was shining brightly." Xiao Su hugged her small body tightly and sighed softly, but he didn't know what to say to comfort her. Originally, he thought that there was a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, but he didn't know that there was no way out. Ethereal also mentioned one more thing during the treatment. Whether or not the patient could wake up depended on the patient's desire to live. If the patient did not have any attachments and did not have a strong desire to live, then it was very likely that the patient would continue to sleep. Everyone thought back to what she had done over the past few days. When she handed the Sun-Moon race and Sun-Moon race over to Jean Xian, she probably had nothing left to worry about. And so, Gong Sunshui slept for 3 days. Xiao Yao also stayed by her side for 3 days. Because no one knew when she would wake up, and no one knew if she would stop breathing in the next moment. So, Xiao Yao couldn't and didn't dare to leave. It was as if he didn't know what fatigue was. He kept talking to her about the interesting things he had experienced when he was young, about the prosperity of the Sichuan, and all the beautiful things in the world. He wanted her to be attached to this mortal world. It was as if he was saying, "Look, this world is so beautiful. There are good food, beautiful scenery, and so many people who care about you. So open your eyes and take a look. Don't sleep anymore." When the Emperor Emeritus found out that the idiot had not slept for 3 days and 3 nights, he brought Father Chu over to force him to go back to sleep. However, they heard his voice at the door. The two of them stood outside in a daze for an hour, but didn't go in. The Emperor Emeritus looked a little pitiful. "I know this idiot talks a lot, but I didn't want him to talk so much." Father Chu looked at the tightly shut door, and his expression became serious for once. Maybe that ice beauty will find him too noisy and beat him up when she wakes up. Then, she'll nag him like Tang Sanzang. If it was in the past, the Emperor Emeritus would definitely ask him who Tang Sanzang was. At this time, he sighed faintly and said, "It's good if she can really be woken up. Let's go. Aren't you going to drag him out?" Father Chu was already prepared to roll up his sleeves and go all out. He was a little confused when he heard this. Didn't he ask him to help? "No, I'm old and can't handle it. Let the young people do it. Let's go drink." When he heard that there was wine to drink, Father Chu immediately rolled up his sleeves and walked in front. "Go, go, go, let's drink. Wine can relieve 1,000 worries." The Emperor Emeritus looked at the bouncing person in front of him and shook his head with a smile. He didn't know if this person was really stupid or stupid. It was late at night, and the entire residence fell into silence. In a courtyard, the candlelight was warm, illuminating the room with a warm glow. Xiao Yao felt that the night wind was getting stronger, so he asked someone to add a heater. Then, he sat down again and leaned against the bedpost, quietly staring at the person on the bed. "It started snowing yesterday. The snow is so beautiful. If you wake up, I'll make a snowman for you, okay? Today, Kang came to see you. He said that if you continue to laze around in bed, you'll be a bad child. Ice Beauty, you've already slept for 3 days. If you continue sleeping like this, I'll pull your ear and wake you up." He pretended to speak casually, but just like the past 3 days, he still didn't get any response. No matter how strong a person's mind was, after holding on for so many days, their spirit would collapse. The ethereal said that if she didn't wake up in 3 days, then, Xiao Yao could no longer force a smile. He held her hand tightly, and pain filled his eyes bit by bit. "Ice Beauty, wake up and look at me, okay?" The famous King Xiao Yao didn't have his usual carefree appearance. He looked sad and troubled by love. Knowing that he wouldn't get a response, Xiao Yao lowered his eyes, trying to restrain his emotions. He didn't want to affect her, even if he knew that she couldn't see. Just as he lowered his head, Gong Sunshue's hand moved slightly. Xiao Yao thought he heard the rustling of clothes and thought that he was hallucinating. Suddenly, there was a weight on the top of his head, as if something warm had covered it. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't control his trembling fingers and slowly raised his head. Until he met that pair of watery eyes, he felt as if countless fireworks had exploded in his head. He opened his mouth, but couldn't speak because he had been talking non-stop for days. She said softly, "You're so noisy. You're making me unable to sleep peacefully." He subconsciously wanted to apologize, but he saw tears welling up in her eyes, wetting her cheeks. Xiao Yao reached out and hugged her tightly. His voice was hoarse and choked with sobs, but it was full of threat. "I'll disturb you. Let's see if you dare to leave me to sleep alone. You being able to wake up is the greatest joy of my life." Chapter 1701. When Gong Sunshui woke up on the last night, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They could finally have a good night's sleep. The next day, Ethereal, Cheng Yan Luo, and Dr. Lu appeared in the room to treat Gong Sunshui. However, there was nothing they could do. Just like what was said in Buddhism, there was no escape from the 8 tribulations of life. Gong Suanxue was currently experiencing one of those tribulations. However, compared to her pale complexion yesterday, her complexion was quite good today. After everyone greeted her warmly, Gong Suanxue's gaze swept over everyone and finally landed on Jean Xian. "Can I speak to you alone?" Jean Xian naturally agreed, but Xiao Yao stood aside with a scowl. "I want to stay too." Gong Suanxue's gaze drifted over, and Xiao Yao admitted defeat. When he walked out, he chased everyone out. "Have a seat." Jean Xian sat down on the chair in front of her. Gong Suanxue smiled. "I heard that you were called Jean Xian before." "Yes, Master gave me that name. I don't intend to change it." Jean Xian replied gently. "That's a good name." She nodded. "Then I'll call you Cousin Jean Xian." "As you wish." Jean Xian only felt pity for his sister, who had spent so much effort for the country. Gong Suanxue looked at the man sitting upright in front of her. She was very pleased that Aunt Chang had left behind such a good seedling for the Murong family. She thought of her own illness and went straight to the point. "Cousin Jean Xian, I'm very sorry that I handed over the Sun and Moon tribes to you without any discussion. If I had more time, I wouldn't have done it. Ever since I talked to you that day, I knew that your ambition wasn't here. Not everyone yearned for imperial power." As she spoke, a bitter smile appeared on her face. "But as you can see, I don't have much time left. I can't drag this out any longer. I can only come up with this plan, which is to use the fastest and most direct method to merge the 2 races. However, there's a drawback to this method, which is that there will be a lot of friction in the future. After all, it's not a gradual process. The merging of the Sun and Moon race officials is a big problem. I know I'm forcing you to do something you don't want to do, but we have the blood of the royal family in us. We can't just sit by and watch the commoners fall into the abyss of suffering, so I can only do this. Cousin Jean Xian, I'm really sorry." Jean Xian looked at his sister who was lying on the bed. Her life was hanging by a thread, but she still did not forget the common people. He was extremely shocked. "I don't blame you." Although his original intention was to reorganize the Japanese and then leave with his master, after experiencing all this and seeing his sister struggling on the verge of death, he slowly changed his mind. "Don't worry, I'll protect North Korea for you." This sentence was very soft, but it represented the promise of a 9-foot-tall man. Gong Suanxue did not expect him to agree so quickly. Her eyes reddened. "Cousin Jean Xian," Jean Xian smiled and raised his hand to stroke her hair. It wasn't easy for Big Brother to have a little sister. "You have to live well. Otherwise, Big Brother really won't have any family in the future." Gong Suanxue smiled and nodded. Tears fell from her eyes. However, on the same day, Gong Suanxue fell into a deep sleep again. Xiao Yao had just breathed a sigh of relief, but his heart was in his throat again. This time, Gong Suanxue's condition worsened. Even the medicine could not alleviate her pain. Seeing her frown even though she was unconscious, it was obvious that she was in great pain. Xiao Yao could not sit still anymore. "Ethereal, hurry up and think of a way. Didn't you save my 3rd sister-in-law back then? You have to work harder." Looking at his second brother who was holding on to Ethereal tightly, Xiao Su could not stand it anymore. "Second brother, calm down." Xiao Yao turned to look at him sadly. "Big brother, I can't calm down. That's my future wife. It wasn't easy for me to fall in love with a wife who hasn't married into the family yet." Xiao Su choked. He turned his head and sighed. Lan Si and the others were still there. When they heard this, they wanted to scold Xiao Yao for tarnishing their sect master's reputation. However, when they saw how sad he was, they let it go. Cheng Yanluo said from the side, "If this illness is delayed, it will only delay the treatment." Dr. Lu shook his head. "That's right. Her condition has been worsening, but we don't even have a way to alleviate it. Ethereal had a flash of inspiration. Little Yen, just because we can't cure her doesn't mean Master can't. Chen Yenluo stood up and said in surprise, that's right. We can ask my father for help. Xiao Yao became excited when he heard this. Where is your father? I'll send someone to invite him. Ethereal voiced his concerns. Master's whereabouts are unpredictable. It's difficult to find him. However, even if we do find him, I'm afraid Miss Gongsun won't be able to hold on until then. Xiao Yao made a prompt decision. That's simple. We'll bring the ice beauty back to Sichuan. Xiao Su and the others nodded. This was the best solution at the moment. However, Lan Si and the others didn't know who Ethereal's master was. They didn't feel at ease letting her go with them. Lan Si said firmly, no, we'll find a better doctor to treat our sect master. You're not allowed to take our sect master out of North Korea. Xiao Yao's temper rose. I want to take her away. The two of them started arguing on the spot. The atmosphere was very tense. Just as they were about to go all out, Chiu Feng stumbled over with a face full of panic. Sect master, bad news. Everyone's expression changed. Xiao Yao was the first to react. He ran toward the courtyard with a pale face. Gongsun Shui woke up. She had just vomited a mouthful of blood and felt much better. However, when Chiu Feng saw her running away after vomiting blood and couldn't stop her, she couldn't help but feel helpless. When the panic-stricken Xiao Yao hugged her tightly, she felt even more helpless. She thought for a moment and hugged him back. I'm fine. You scared me to death. Xiao Yao tightened his arms. He wanted nothing more than to give half of his life to her so that she could be safe and happy. At this moment, everyone rushed in. When they saw this scene, they left Ethereal, Chen Yenluo, and Dr. Lu behind and left. Xiao Su stood at the door, blocking Lan Si and the others' way. After knowing that Xiao Su was once the emperor of a country, Lan Si didn't dare to underestimate him. She treated him with more respect. What's the matter, young Master Xiao? You should know the Xiao family's status in Sichuan. I won't say more. It's much easier for us to find a doctor to treat our sect master. So whether you agree or not, we'll take Gongsun Shui with us. When Xiao Su said this, Lan Si's expression changed. However, he was helpless. How could North Korea compare to a big country like Sichuan? However, he couldn't hand over his sect master to them so easily. As long as our sect master agrees, we have no objections. Xiao Su said calmly, all right, I'll give you 1 day to prepare. We'll set off tomorrow. Lan Si was stunned. Their sect master hadn't agreed yet. Chapter 1702. However, no one expected that Gongsun Shui would not agree to leave North Korea. Why? Now that she finally had some hope, Xiao Yao really couldn't understand her thoughts. Gongsun Shui had already taken her medicine and eaten. Her complexion had recovered a little. She was no longer as gentle as she was when she woke up and saw Xiao Yao today. I grew up here. I don't want to leave. It's not like we won't come back. When you're cured, I'll come back with you whenever you want, okay? Xiao Yao coaxed her gently as if he was coaxing a child. How do you know I'll definitely come back? The more Gongsun Shui saw him treating her like this, the more upset she felt. She turned her head to the side and spoke insincerely. Xiao Yao was stunned. She felt that she could not cure her illness. When everyone was working hard for her sake, she gave up. How could he not be angry? You haven't tried. How do you know you can't cure her? Are you 100% sure? Gongsun Shui looked at him emotionlessly. Even if it was ethereal, they could not guarantee it. He was not a doctor and could not guarantee it. However, seeing her like this, it was obvious that she had given up on herself. He was both distressed and angry. There were other people in the room. Xiao Su patted his brother's shoulder. Talk to her nicely. Don't be angry. After that, Xiao Su led everyone out. Only Xiao Yao and Gongsun Shui were left in the room. There was no one else around. Xiao Yao sat down in front of her and reached out to hold her hand. Unexpectedly, she pulled her hand back and avoided his hand. She seemed to casually roll up her sleeves. Xiao Yao had always been thick-skinned. He had been rejected by her many times in the past. He had already trained himself to adjust his mentality. He did not take this small matter to heart. Instead, he continued with the previous topic. Ice Beauty, don't worry. My brother has many people working for him. When we reach Sichuan, he will find you a good doctor. Just trust me this time. Don't be angry, okay? Gong Suanxue shook her head. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I know that your Xiao family is indeed powerful, but I can't bear to leave this place. My father said that Yi Luo must return to his roots. I know very well whether or not my illness can be cured. Maybe I'll just fall asleep. I feel guilty for making you guys work for nothing. Xiao Yao said patiently, how is this asking us to work for nothing? Ethereal and the others can't do anything about Fengling's body. We also need to find a better doctor. Ethereal's master is a world-famous doctor. As long as we find him, there will be hope for you and Fengling's illness. Moreover, you're still living well. Don't curse yourself. The heavens are virtuous. You're so kind and good-looking. They won't take you away so early. Can you come with me in peace? There was no need for him to ask if there was a famous doctor in the world. Based on his doting tone, she had already agreed in her heart. However, Gong Suanxue put away the bitterness in her heart and turned to look at him. Xiao Yao, I'm not related to you. You don't have to do so much for me. I won't leave this place no matter what. You don't have to persuade me anymore. These understated words were like a basin of cold water poured directly from the top of Xiao Yao's head, chilling him to the core. He had been hanging around in front of her for so long. Although they had never gone through thick and thin together, the friendship between them was worthless in her eyes. In the end, all he got was not related to her. He really wanted to ask if her heart was really made of stone. Why was it still so hard after he had covered it for so long? A ball of fire rose in his heart. However, when he saw her pale face, he could only swallow all the words he wanted to say. He had nowhere to vent his anger, and he didn't want to see her. In the end, he got up and left without a word. Seeing him leave in a huff, Gong Suanxue's face turned even paler. She clutched the quilt tightly, and her face was full of pain. What she said just now was not her original intention. But other than this, she really had no other choice. Xiao Yao's setback with Gong Suanxue soon reached Chu Qingyan's ears. She looked worried. How could this be? The two of them couldn't come to an agreement. Or did second brother make her angry again? It shouldn't be. Second brother doted on her to the bone. He was so protective of his children. How could he make her angry? Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, Xiao Su explained to her, Gong Suanxue doesn't want to go back to Sichuan with us. Chu Qingyan suddenly understood and said, actually, I can understand Miss Gong Suanxue's feelings. After all, this is the place where she grew up for more than 10 years. She can't bear to leave so soon. Plus, this illness is not easy to treat. She probably wants to die. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and didn't comment. Instead, he reached out to take her hand and rubbed it in his palm, transferring the heat from his body to her cold little hand. Don't worry about this. We're leaving tomorrow. Whether she agrees or not, we have to leave. Feng Ling's illness can't be delayed. Chu Qingyan glared at him. She didn't blame the big ice cube for saying this. Feng Ling had managed to keep his life for the past 2 days. While the situation was good, he had to find a way to prolong his life. So the big ice cube couldn't wait any longer. Both of them were important, but they couldn't delay the other's life because of one of them. Xiao Su squeezed his little wife's hand and said softly, I'm not cold-blooded. One of us leaves first, and one of us can be saved. Second brother isn't easy to deal with. He can handle it well. It's the same if we leave early and they leave later. How could he describe his own brother like that? Chu Qingyan was amused by him. But she thought carefully, then looked at the sky and made a decision. Big Ice Cube, I want to go to Miss Gong Sunshue's place to take a look. You're pregnant. It's not good for you to keep going out. It was freezing outside. Xiao Su couldn't bear to let his little wife go out. Chu Qingyan did not take Jiang Yi's words to heart as she continued, I have my own considerations. Don't think that second brother can really resolve this matter. If he could, he would not have left in a fit of anger today. Maybe I can turn the situation around if I go. Even he can't solve it. Do you think you can? Xiao Su chuckled. Chu Qingyan smiled faintly, her eyes calm as she said, after all, the onlooker sees the game best. Think about it. Lady Gongsun is so young, but she is able to play such a big game of chess. She has taken everyone into consideration. How can she be a simple girl? Xiao Su was silent. Big Ice Cube's silence meant that he agreed. She continued, so, the best path for her now is to go with us. But she rejected it. I think she might have something on her mind. After Xiao Su warmed her hand, he touched her face and chuckled. When you go, bring Jasper and Hualing. Be careful when you walk. I know. I'm not a child. Seeing that he agreed, Chu Qingyan was overjoyed. Before she left, she boasted, where can you find such a good sister-in-law like me in this world? Xiao Su smiled. Chapter 1703. Chu Qingyan thought that she would see a sickly ice beauty lying on the bed, and she would feel pity for her. However, as soon as she entered the room, she saw a hard-working woman sitting at the desk, writing furiously. What are you doing? Don't you know you should lie down to recuperate when you are sick? Chu Qingyan walked to the desk, raised her hand and knocked on the table, and said in a worried tone. Gongsun Shui, who was engrossed in writing, did not notice that she had entered the room. At this moment, she raised her head and looked at the beautiful woman in red with black hair. She came back to herself. I couldn't stay idle, so I finished all the government affairs left behind. She put down the pen and looked confused. Mrs. Xiao, what can I do for you? Chu Qingyan teased her with a smile, can't I come to visit you if I don't have anything to do? Gongsun Shui said embarrassedly, of course not. Chu Qingyan stopped smiling and said, there have been many people coming and going these days, so I didn't come. I came several times, but you were in a coma. I didn't see you until today. Gongsun Shui said gratefully, thank you for your concern. I'm much better now. Chu Qingyan saw that she did not cherish herself and could not help but say, even if you're much better, you shouldn't waste it like this. It's not like you don't have people under you. Just let them do the work. Besides, don't you still have Gene X in? You are in a special situation now. Don't be so tired. Gongsun Shui knew that she was concerned about her, so she accepted it modestly. At this time, seeing that she was still standing, she immediately asked someone to take a seat. Chu Qingyan sat down beside her, and the servant also served hot tea. She had just had dinner and could not drink anything at this time, so she put the teacup on the table and talked about business. I heard that you don't want to go to the Sichuan with me. When she appeared, Gongsun Shui knew that she should be here for this matter, so she had already prepared an excuse. I don't want to leave here. After all, I was born and raised here, and the high priest also asked people to look for famous doctors. I think it is the same to stay here to treat my illness. Chu Qingyan shook her head and said directly, if your people could find a famous doctor, they wouldn't have waited until now. It had been so many years, and if it could be found, it would have long been cured. It wouldn't have dragged on until now. Gongsun Shui was stunned. She didn't expect her to see through her so quickly. Thinking about how Big Ice Cube only wanted her to stay for an hour, Chu Qingyan decided not to beat around the bush. She looked at Gong Xuanxue seriously and said, Lady Gong Xuanxue, we have known each other for more than half a year, and I have always treated you as a friend. Can you tell me the truth? Are you really staying because of these reasons, or do you have other difficulties? Regardless of whether or not Xiao Yao was the reason, she really liked this girl who was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. Whether it was her nature or her character, she felt that she was very good. When they first met, she liked her, so she couldn't bear to see her wither at such a beautiful age. Chu Qingyan's question stunned Gong Xuanxue. This was the first time she had met someone who was so direct with her words. When she regained her composure, she wanted to dodge the question, but she could not ignore Chu Qingyan's obvious concern. She really liked this girl in front of her. She was straightforward when she needed to be, cunning when she needed to be. She lived a carefree life, just like the stars in the sky, the horses in the grasslands, and the birds in the sea. She lived a life that Gong Xuanxue yearned for, and it made Gong Xuanxue envious. Actually, at this point, the Sun Clan and the Moon Clan are just a responsibility to me. They are not shackles that prevent me from leaving. My parents are no longer alive, so wherever I go, I have no restrictions. I can go wherever I want. It's just that, Gong Xuanxue smiled and said self-deprecatingly, it's just that when I'm no longer the young sect leader, my life doesn't allow me to be willful. It's as if the heavens want to take my life after I've completed my mission. I don't know if I can live for one more day, or 2 more hours. I will only be a burden to others. Why bother? The last 3 words couldn't be any lighter. It was like a feather brushing past, but it left behind an indescribable sense of loss. Chu Qingyan looked at her with pity. She could understand how she felt, but she didn't forget why she came here in the first place. By others, you mean Xiao Yao, right? Gong Xuanxue's long eyelashes fluttered. She closed her eyes and said with a bleak voice, I'm already a person who has 1 foot in the coffin. He still has a great future ahead of him. I don't want him to waste his time on me, and I don't want him to see me for the last time before I leave. He's a mountain stream, the wind of the earth. He should be free and carefree. I don't want him to be held back by me. She wasn't blind. How could she not see his feelings for her over the past few days? Therefore, she didn't want to be a burden to him. Only when he left far away and returned to his unrestrained Xishuan could she leave with peace of mind. Although she tried her best to hide the pain and reluctance in her eyes, Chu Qingyan still caught it. She couldn't help but think of Ethereal and Pang Zhijing. She clearly loved him, but she had no choice but to push him far away. Miss Gong Sun, do you want to hear the opinion of someone who has been through this? Gong Xuanxue looked up at her and nodded. The light cast their graceful silhouettes on the paper window, becoming a touch of light in the gradually cold night. Chu Qingyan didn't leave until Xiao Su came to pick her up. Gong Xuanxue was still immersed in the conversation between Chu Qingyan and her just now. At this time, the door creaked open. She thought it was Chiu Feng who came in to tidy up and didn't pay attention. It wasn't until the slender figure stood in front of her bed that she raised her head in a daze. When she saw the gentle smile on his face, she was stunned again. She couldn't understand why he left because of her anger today, but acted as if nothing had happened. She was stunned and didn't say anything. Xiao Yao had already bent down and half knelt in front of her bed. His tone was extremely gentle. I was in a bad mood today and made you angry. Don't be angry. You can do whatever you want. Leave or stay, it's up to you, alright? After leaving the house today, he slowly calmed down in the cold wind. The ice beauty was still sick, so why should he be calculative with her? It was already the greatest blessing that she was still in front of him. What else could he ask for? His biggest wish now was that she was still alive. Gong Xuanxue's eyes reddened. Today, he had not said a single harsh word to her. Instead, it was her who had repeatedly hurt his heart. If this matter had happened to someone else, ignoring her would have been a matter of course, but he had come. Not only had he taken the initiative to take responsibility for all the mistakes, he had also softly coaxed her. How could she not be moved? She thought about what Chu Qingyan said tonight and blamed herself even more. Xiao Yao didn't think that admitting his mistakes would make the ice beauty cry. He scolded himself for not knowing how to speak properly in his heart as he hurriedly raised his hand to wipe her tears. It's all my fault. If you're unhappy, you can hit me and scold me. Don't be angry. Gong Sun Shui bit her lip and looked at him, allowing him to clumsily wipe her tears. Finally, she opened her mouth and asked. You said you would take me to see the beautiful Sichuan and eat all the delicacies in the world. Does that still count? Chapter 1704. Xiao Yao, who was still blaming himself, thought he was hallucinating when he heard those words. It wasn't until he looked at her in a daze and saw the smile in her eyes that he was sure those words really came from the ice beauty's mouth. Yes, it all counts. He nodded seriously, but the curve at the corner of his mouth betrayed his mood. Gong Sun Shui couldn't help but smile. Her snow-white skin and black eyes were like dots of ink. She didn't smile often, but this smile was like a spring breeze blowing across the surface of a pond, sparkling and bright. Xiao Yao looked at her in a daze. Ice beauty, you look really good when you smile. Gong Sun Shui blushed at his frank praise. She couldn't help but purse her lips and restrain her smile, but her eyes were still smiling. What nonsense are you talking about? Seeing her blushing face, Xiao Yao naturally knew she was shy. He laughed mischievously, his heart feeling sweet. But after thinking about it, he was a bit worried. Ice beauty, are you really willing to return to the Sichuan with me? Gong Sun Shui saw through his thoughts and nodded. I also want to see the place where you live. Xiao Yao was in a good mood and reached out to hug her. When you get to the Sichuan and recover from your illness, I'll take you to see Jiangnan's small bridges and flowing water, the desert smoke, the surging rivers and seas, and the countless flowers, plants, birds, and beasts. Do you know? There's a pond in my mansion. Gong Sun Shui let him hug her, listening to him talk endlessly, her eyes full of smiles. While she was unconscious, she wasn't completely unconscious. She had heard everything he said. She reached out and hugged him, closing her eyes and leaning against him. Okay. I'll agree to anything you say. The dim yellow light brought her back to 2 hours ago. I know you're doing this for Xiao Yao's good, but have you asked him how he feels? It's not that I'm speaking for him as his sister-in-law. I've known him for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen him put down his status as a prince for a woman. He's deliberately trying to make her happy, distressed, and annoyed for her. It's not like it's always raining. How can you take back the feelings you've given out so easily? If you think that you'll be able to make him recover just because you're gone, you're truly too foolish and too naive. You can't make a unilateral decision for the two of you. That's too selfish. Who doesn't live for death? From the moment we were born, we were destined to step into the grave. But just because we knew we were going to die, did we stop living our lives? Then what's the point of living? I once heard someone say that living is probably for the sake of, when the clear spring flows by, the taste is sweet, when the flowers are blooming, there is someone to accompany, when the wind and rain is blowing, there is someone to protect. Therefore, everyone is bound to die. Why do we have to be so fixated on when to die? Isn't it better to live in the present? That soft and elegant voice was still echoing in her ears. Gong Sunshu smiled gently. Yes, she was too selfish. She thought that everything she did was for the good of the other party, but that was not what he wanted. Xiao Yao buried his head in her hair. His voice was a little hoarse. Ice Beauty, I'm very happy that you've changed your mind. I'm really happy. Gong Sunshu pulled herself away from those words and quietly let him embrace her. Her limbs, which were always cold, were warmed up by him. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her eyes were clear. There was no conflict, no hesitation, and no trouble. Thus, Xiao Yao heard the most beautiful and moving words of his life. Xiao Yao, I don't know how long I can live. But if I can live as long as I can, I'll accompany you, okay? The elegant gentleman in front of her had pulled her out of the ice mountain and snow. The endless darkness was far away from her. He had filled the void in her life and made her feel no longer lonely. He had made her realize that there were many things in this world that were worth pursuing other than responsibility and righteousness. For example, freedom, good food, beautiful scenery, and love. Xiao Yao could not believe what he had heard. He raised his head to look at her. His trembling hand caressed her face. His eyes were a little misty. His voice was resolute and decisive. Okay. You'll definitely live a long life. We'll definitely live until our hair turns white and all our teeth fall out. He gently planted a kiss on her face and made a sincere vow in his heart. To hold your hand and grow old together. Tonight, she would offer her true heart and no longer run away. She would accompany you as long as you lived. This promise was desperate and affectionate. To grow old together was easy to pick up the brush, but it was not easy to finish writing stroke by stroke. But no matter what the future was, they had to live in the present. Only by loving could they have hopes and expectations. If they did not cherish the present, even if they had 100 years, it would only be a fleeting moment. It would all be a waste. Early in the morning, the carriages and horses left Luocheng in a grandiose manner. On the city gate tower, Xining leaned on Jean Xian's shoulder. Her eyes were red and it was obvious that she had cried. At this moment, she asked in a hoarse voice, "Will we be able to see Master again?" Jean Xian hugged her waist tightly. His gaze was reluctant to part. "That day will come. I hope that cousin and Feng Ling can recover soon. We will." Separation was the most important thing. East and west flowed like water. When Chu Qingyan and the others were heading to Sichuan, a dark purple figure walked out of the mountain gate. If Chu Qingyan and the others were present, they would know that this was the entrance to North Korea. This person was none other than Higashio Motetsu, whom they had not seen for more than a month. He closed the mountain gate and looked at the scenery around him. He smiled softly. He did not expect that almost a year had passed since he left that day and stood on the land of Sichuan again. He took a deep breath. Home was still the best. Although the scenery in North Korea was not bad, it was still separated by a layer. At this moment, the mountain breeze blew, and the leaves rustled. Although it was a little cold in this winter, it carried a familiar warmth to his ears. Sichuan was still the best. Everything was pleasing to the eye. However, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a series of footprints on the ground. He stopped stretching and bent down to look. The footprints were different from those of a man. They were very small. Because it had just rained, the prints on them were still clearly visible. He saw the familiar lines, and the corners of his mouth curled up. This little girl had indeed come out. It was not in vain that he had chased her all the way here. He had gained something. Actually, he was also feeling very bitter. Every time he went to a place, she had already left. Now, even with his eyes closed, he could tell which footprints belonged to her. It was a tragic sight for a palace master to end up like this. However, now was not the time to sigh and lament. Finding the person was the key. He casually threw a signal into the air. As long as the people of the Moon Palace saw it, they would come to help. He casually tore off a piece of grass and bit it as he leaned against a large rock. His mind was a little distracted. He wondered how the little witch was doing now. Now that they were out of North Korea, he had given the order. It was only a matter of time before he found her. As long as he found her, he would definitely settle the score with her. He had seduced her but did not take responsibility. What was this? However, at this moment, Higashio Motetsu, who was filled with resentment and longing, had no idea that she did not want to take responsibility at all. Tao Tao, it's too late. Chapter 1705. Heavy snow fell, and the glazed tiles were covered with a layer of white snow. The ground was basically covered in snow, and the flowers and plants were all covered. It was difficult to see any greenery or red. A small figure appeared in the palace corridor. Her delicate little face was flushed red. At this moment, she was very curious about the falling snowflakes. She opened her fingers, wanting to touch them. However, after a long time, not a single snowflake fell. Only then did she realize that she was too far away from the courtyard. She immediately walked under the eaves and stretched out her hand again, thinking that a few snowflakes should fall on her hand this time. However, this time, there were still no snowflakes. She blinked. Was it because she was not standing tall enough? But she was about to step on the snow outside. The little child looked up in confusion and realized that there was an umbrella above her head. She turned her head to look, and her face immediately bloomed like a flower. Imperial Father. Because she was small, she could only hug his thigh happily. The adoration and joy on her face were overflowing with words. This crisp call woke up the palace servants who were standing guard not far away. They immediately knelt down. They had only been distracted for a moment just now, and the little princess had run under the eaves. She was even discovered by His Majesty on the spot. How could this be? Xiao Ho ignored the palace servants. Instead, he bent down and picked up the little one. Then, he handed the umbrella in his hand to the servant. Why did you run out instead of staying in the room? He had just finished the morning court. Although it was snowing heavily and the people around him advised him to wait for the snow to stop before returning, he missed the big darling and the little darling. He did not stay in the imperial study and came back directly. Unexpectedly, the moment he entered the palace, he saw the little darling taking small steps to touch the snowflakes. She looked so adorable that he could not help but walk over quickly. I was bored in the hall, so I ran out to get some fresh air. The little ball was carried into Nuanyuan's arms. The smile on her face did not disappear. However, when she saw that her father was about to bring her into the house, she became a little anxious. Imperial Father, I want snowflakes. Only then did Xiao Ho remember that the little darling wanted to touch the snowflakes. He looked at the vast expanse of snow and said, "It's cold. Don't play with the snow. It's not good to catch a cold." Hearing this, little ball lay on his shoulder and looked at the courtyard with some reluctance. In the end, it blinked its big eyes and said cutely, "Imperial Father, little ball doesn't need a lot. Just one piece is enough. Is that okay?" When the little darling looked over, he had already softened. Now that she was acting spoiled and cute, even if the little darling wanted the stars in the sky, he would agree without hesitation. He stopped in his tracks and lowered his head to kiss the little darling's cheek. He chuckled and said, "Okay." As he spoke, he reached out his hand under the eaves and caught a snowflake. However, he was a person who had internal energy to protect his body. The temperature of his palm was not low. The snowflake melted as soon as it touched his hand. By the time he placed it in front of the little ball, it had already turned into a puddle of water. Xiao Ho frowned. It was rare for the little darling to make such a request, but he couldn't even do such a simple thing. However, the little darling in his arms did not think this way. She quickly pulled out a handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped his palm, her eyes full of self-blame. Imperial Mother said that the water in the winter is very cold. Little Ball was not obedient and let Imperial Father get wet. Little Ball doesn't want the snowflake. Xiao Ho's heart immediately warmed. Looking at his little darling, even her clumsy appearance was extremely cute. Imperial Father is fine. Imperial Father's body is strong and is not afraid of this little bit of water. Although he said this, the little ball still firmly shook her head and didn't want the snowflake. Xiao Ho found it funny. Just now, she was acting cute and wanted to play with a snowflake. Now, she felt that the snowflake was an extremely vicious thing. She pulled on his clothes and wanted to go back to the hall, not even wanting to look. She really was a fickle little darling. However, his heart was once again softened. Pang Zhijing was looking at the things in her hands when she heard the sound of someone kowtowing outside. Her heart panicked and she immediately closed the book in her hands, thinking about where to hide it to be safe. However, she did not have any time to react as the person was already outside the door. She saw the cushion beside her and immediately stuffed the book inside in a fluster. She let out a sigh of relief and prepared to straighten her clothes to welcome the person who came back. However, just as she was about to raise her head, two pairs of eyes were staring at her from the door. One pair was confused and curious, while the other had a teasing smile. She swallowed her saliva. It can't be. Did they find out that she was hiding something just now? Imperial Mother, what are you doing? Little Ball was carried in and placed on a chair. He tilted his head to look at her curiously. Of course, Peng Zhijing would not say what she had done. She quickly changed the topic. You went out to play and met your imperial father? This method of changing the topic was very stiff, but Xiao Ho did not expose her. His eyes casually swept over the cushion from before and his lips hooked. He picked up a teacup from the side and drank from it. Peng Zhijing was talking to her daughter, but she was paying attention to him. When she saw him pick up the teacup that she had just drunk from, her face turned red. She wanted to remind him, but she was stopped by her daughter. That's right, that's right. Imperial Mother, it's snowing so heavily outside. It's already submerged 2 levels of the stone steps. Little Ball was very engrossed in talking, and she even gesticulated with her hands and feet. She was dressed in fluffy clothes, with snow-white skin and red lips. She looked very lovable, and Peng Zhijing forgot to remind her. She took Little Ball and put her on her knees, and took a pastry from the side to feed her. Although the snow is beautiful, don't step on it in the courtyard. You already said that it's submerged 2 levels of the steps. If you step on it, where do you think it'll submerge you? Peng Zhijing did not forget to teach her. Little Ball thought that it was difficult for her to take one step, which meant that her legs were short. If the snow submerged 2 levels, it would definitely submerge most of her. Thinking about it, she immediately declared, Little Ball will definitely not casually step on it. Peng Zhijing nodded in satisfaction. Seeing that she liked to eat pastries, she moved the plate over to let her eat to her heart's content. Xiao Ho ate breakfast and went to court before dawn. After discussing state affairs with the officials for most of the day, he came back with an empty stomach. He had just drunk some hot tea and reached out to touch the pastries on the table to fill his stomach, but he did not expect to touch anything. Looking along the table, the big darling was holding Little Treasure and Little Treasure was holding a plate. At this time, they were eating happily. The big darling was looking at Little Treasure with a doting expression. Little Treasure even asked the big darling if he wanted to eat a piece. It was really delicious. Xiao Ho suddenly felt that in this family, his status was close to nothing. In the big darling's eyes, there was only Little Treasure, not him. The country's emperor who had intimidated the officials this morning was eating a mouthful of vinegar on this snowy day. And the source of this vinegar was his Little Treasure. Chapter 1706. Peng Zhijing was so focused on taking care of Little Ball that she forgot that there was still someone who needed her concern. She inadvertently raised her head and saw her family's thick skin glaring at her with jealousy. She couldn't help but find it funny. What's wrong with you? Is there something on my face? She deliberately teased him. Xiao Ho gave a soft snort, not willing to respond to her. Everyone in the hall knew that the emperor and empress were starting to spread dog food again. They all suppressed their laughter and lowered their heads, afraid of being discovered. Little Ball also noticed her father emperor's appearance. Seeing him glance at her plate, she thought for a bit and couldn't help pushing the plate in front of him. Father Emperor, you eat. Xiao Ho thought, it was still his daughter who doted on him. However, Big Darling took the plate back and gave him a displeased look. You're already so old, what are you stealing a child's food for? Xiao Ho's heart felt stifled. He wasn't a 3-year-old child who liked to eat sweets. Wasn't it her who cared for her daughter and threw him to the side? Then he heard Big Darling say, I know it's cold. You must be hungry after working for so long. I already had the imperial kitchen prepare hot soup and hot rice for you. Don't eat these things, otherwise you won't be able to eat later. When Xiao Ho heard this, his drooping lips couldn't help but raise. He was so happy that he wanted to kiss her, but because his daughter and the palace servants were present, he could only settle for the next best thing. He rubbed her face and revealed a smile. Pang Zhijing was dazzled by his smile. He was still so handsome, so good-looking. She thought that no matter how beautiful something was, there would be a day when she would get tired of it. However, this person in front of her kept showing his presence in front of her all day, yet she never felt tired of it. Instead, the more she looked at him, the more she liked him. The more she liked him, the more she wanted to see him. She felt like she really had a man-crazy disease that couldn't be cured. Once, she had even seriously discussed this matter with him. She hadn't thought that he would touch his face and ruefully say, "I didn't think that you were such a shallow person." She wanted to refute, but she heard him throw out, "It's fine, I'm good-looking. You can be shallow your entire life." She choked. She couldn't blame him for being thick-skinned. His skin really was thick to the point of no end. However, he was also right. Even after a few decades, when both of them had entered their twilight years, he was still good-looking. Seeing his big baby's stunned expression, Xiao Ho was both happy and helpless. He, Xiao Ho, had lived for so many years and had never thought of living off his looks. That was why he had racked his brains and worked hard. It was very effective in the court, but it was not effective in the harem. He didn't expect that it was this beautiful skin that had played a role. He rubbed his chin. Forget it, as long as his wife liked it. Just at this moment, a palace servant came up to ask if they wanted to serve food. Pang Zhijing nodded. Soon, exquisite dishes were served. At this time, Little Ball no longer clung to her. It also did not need anyone's help. It climbed onto the chair on its own and sat upright. Then, it picked up its own chopsticks. Even though Pang Zhijing doted on her only daughter, she did not slack off in the aspect of independence. However, Little Ball's maturity today was not entirely due to her teaching. When she was in a coma for a few years, Little Ball was able to think of taking care of her. At such a young age, it was already very precious. Xiao Ho looked at his daughter who was eating by herself. He was very gratified, but at the same time, he remembered something. Right now, there was no palace servant by his side, so he said, "When I came back just now, I saw that the palace servants taking care of Little Ball were all slacking off. They didn't even notice that she was about to run into the snow." Pang Zhijing watched her daughter eat as she added more food for him. Hearing this, her chopsticks paused, but she continued to busy herself. "You don't have to worry. Today, I moved away the mamas by Little Ball's side to see which ones were not doing their job." He didn't expect that his big darling looked soft, but it was not easy to bully. A smile appeared on Xiao Ho's face. "It's good that you know what to do." Hearing him mention this matter, Pang Zhijing thought for a bit, then looked at him with a shadow of a smile. Xiao Ho was ladling soup for her. Seeing her put down her chopsticks with such an indescribable expression, his brows jumped. He had a bad feeling. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Humph, guilty." Pang Zhijing's mouth twitched. Xiao Ho felt very wronged. He really did not know what he had done wrong. It was just that every time she showed this kind of expression, it meant that he was going to be unlucky. Every time he was unlucky, he would have to sleep in the imperial study. At this time, the perceptive Little Ball put the empty bowl on the table. She blinked and said, "Imperial father, Imperial mother, Little Ball is going out to play." As she spoke, she got off the chair again and pattered away. Pang Zhijing picked a few people to follow before she continued to deal with the people in front of her. A few more palace maids have been stuffed into the palace. They have done a lot of wrong things. The steward mama wanted to punish them, but after checking their identities, they did not dare to move. They reported it to me. Pang Zhijing propped up her chin and looked at him with a smile. "May I ask your majesty the emperor, how should the D daughter of the grand tutor, the second D daughter of the general, and the D daughter of the minister of war be dealt with?" That full smile made Xiao Ho's heart itch. But the next words made him sober. Because he only wanted to spend his life as a little rascal, he did not take a fey. Therefore, the same thing that had happened to his imperial brother had happened to him. The officials all urged him to open up a harem and take in concubines. How could he compromise? Therefore, he brought up his imperial brother and continued his style of doing things. In front of the civil and military officials, he said that he would never take a fey. Because of the previous example, the officials did not dare to say anything openly. But they thought of a way behind the scenes. They disguised their daughters as palace maids and sent them into the palace. They thought that if they received the emperor's favor one day, they would be made a guefei. No one could find fault with this roundabout plan. Then there were palace maids that fell to the ground when Xiao Ho went to the imperial study and needed his help to get up. When he went to the imperial garden, there were palace maids that held pastries and needed him to taste them before he could leave. When he returned to the harem, there were a bunch of palace maids that shyly threw flirtatious glances at him. It was really annoying. They did not do proper things. They were delicate and needed others to wait on them. They made the imperial palace a mess. But because his imperial brother had just passed the country to him, Xiao Ho could not be too ruthless. He sent a lot of them back to the Fu. However, because Xiao Ho did not say it openly, the officials thought that the daughters they sent were not beautiful enough. They used different methods to send in daughters that they thought were prettier. Xiao Ho chuckled. The most beautiful woman in the world was his little rascal. Even if the others looked like flowers, he would still think that they were ugly. Now that they were shoving people to the little ball, it was no wonder that little rascal was angry. However, half of it was jealousy. Xiao Ho had originally thought of a way to solve this problem once and for all. He was just about to send someone to deal with it today. He did not expect that little rascal would come to him to settle the score. The corner of his lips hooked up and he thought of teasing her. A helpless expression appeared on his face. The backers behind these people are not easy to deal with. I am also in a difficult position. Pang Zhijing chuckled when she heard this. Do you still want to sleep in the imperial study tonight? Xiao Ho choked. He had shot himself in the foot. Chapter 1707. At this time, Xiao Ho was already 80% full. He put down his chopsticks and stared at her. The royal study is so cold at night. How can you bear to let me sleep there? Pang Zhijing smiled brightly at him. How can it be cold? There are so many beauties waiting for you. Looking at them makes my heart warm. Usually, the brighter little rascal's smile at this time, the more jealous she was. Xiao Ho looked at her face and couldn't help but laugh. The smile on Pang Zhijing's face froze. She stood up angrily. Is it fun to laugh at me? You really want to sleep in the royal study tonight? So you were lying to me. Xiao Su crossed his arms and teased her. Pang Zhijing was stunned. She raised her chin and walked into the inner hall angrily. He was right about little rascal. Xiao Ho looked at the table and waved his sleeves to have the servants take it away. He then followed her in with light steps. Pang Zhijing was sulking in her room. She didn't expect this shameless person to follow her in. She turned her head away and ignored him. Xiao Ho didn't want to be rebuffed at this time. He sat down on the other side. Pang Zhijing was very curious when she heard the rustling sound from Xiao Ho's side. However, she suppressed her temper and didn't turn around. This Lu Sheng is a scholar. His family isn't prominent. He doesn't have the right to enter the aristocratic family's courtyard to celebrate the emperor's birthday. This setting doesn't make sense. Pang Zhijing couldn't help but say, who cares if the setting doesn't make sense? It's just a cheat for the protagonist. Otherwise, how could he meet that young lady? As she spoke, she suddenly realized something. She turned around and saw the book in his hand. Wasn't it the book that she had stuffed into the cushion? She had forgotten about it because she was angry with him. She didn't expect him to be so sharp and find it. Because the folk customs of Xixian were open, when these novels described romantic love stories, they would always add some explicit words of love or descriptions of intimacy. But for Pang Zhijing, who came from the modern world, this was nothing. She had read even more explicit ones. Unfortunately, the thick-skinned man had never allowed her to read these books, saying that they were all miscellaneous books, and that it would be better to read proper books. But she was bored, so she asked someone to bring them into the palace without telling him. Who would have thought that she would be caught red-handed by him? She originally thought that this was normal, but the thick-skinned person wasn't a modern person. When she thought that the page he was flipping might be about the marriage of the male and female lead, her face turned red. She took 3 steps forward, wanting to snatch it away. Unexpectedly, he had already anticipated her actions. He raised his arm and she grabbed nothing but air. Unfortunately, her footsteps were too hurried and her left foot stepped on the hem of her skirt. She lost her balance and directly fell into his arms. Weren't the two of them arguing right now? How could he take the initiative? Pang Zhijing immediately scrambled to get up, but she felt her waist being hugged by someone, and her whole body changed position and was held in his arms. At this time, a scorching hot breath brushed past her sensitive earlobe. She couldn't help but shrink her neck back as she heard him say with a smile, "I didn't think that the Empress would be so passionate," throwing herself into Zhen's arms. If Zhen didn't live up to the Empress' intentions, wouldn't it be bad? What passion, what intentions, this person was purposely teasing her. She opened her mouth to refute, but a black shadow covered her and kissed her lips. Because she had just opened her mouth, it gave him a chance. His warm tongue slid in, leading her into a lingering kiss. She was carried by him and placed on his lap. There was no point for her to exert any strength, and her entire body was leaning on him. At this moment, he was kissing her fiercely, and she couldn't push him away even if she wanted to. In the end, she was brought in by him. Her hands couldn't help but wrap around his neck, afraid that she would fall. Xiao Ho's plan succeeded and he softened his movements. After one round, Pang Zhijing's cheeks were flushed red. Her large eyes were moist and her lips were red, making Xiao Ho's heart flutter. However, he knew that there were still things to do right now so that he could eat Little Rascal without any distractions. "You don't need to worry about the palace maids. I've already thought of a way." When the person who had been kissed into a daze heard this, she became spirited. "What way?" Xiao Ho was provoked by her cute and dazed appearance to take another bite. Pang Zhijing, was his zodiac sign a dog? Xiao Ho didn't keep her in suspense anymore. Otherwise, if he angered Little Rascal, he would have to suffer. He directly said, "Aren't those officials thinking of finding a son-in-law for their daughters? I already have a wife and daughter, how can I delay their future? Therefore, I plan to be a matchmaker for them. In any case, they've already entered the palace. In secret, they're still noble misses, but in the open, they're already palace maids. I can't marry a few palace maids to the soldiers guarding the borders, right?" Pang Zhijing was stunned. Marrying a delicate official's daughter to a soldier at the borders, only he could think of such a thing. However, people who could think of stuffing their daughters into the palace and vainly hope to gain the emperor's favor weren't good people either. Therefore, Pang Zhijing didn't sympathize with those officials at all. She beamed as she hugged his arm and said, "This way, the soldiers at the borders will also have their personal problems solved." How amazing! A trace of coldness flashed through Xiao Ho's eyes. Those who had the nerve to make things difficult for his people, he didn't mind returning the favor. Later on, after Xiao Ho released the news, those noble palace maids cried and yelled, wanting to go home. The officials were so frightened that they immediately used their connections to redeem their daughters, afraid that they would really be sent to those places where birds wouldn't shit and chickens wouldn't lay eggs. In less than 2 days, the harem was quiet. Even the native palace maids were very well behaved. They were just short of having "obedient servants" written on their faces. However, this was a story for another time. The camera pulled back to the inner palace. After the official business was finished, it was time to do some private matters. Xiaohou stood up with her in his arms and walked towards the bed. Pang Zhijing hurriedly grabbed his collar. What are you doing? Put me down. Exercising after the meal. He was only 80% full just now. He left 20% of his stomach just to eat her. As she spoke, he had already pressed her down on the bed. I'm not full yet. She wanted to use the excuse of continuing to eat lunch to escape. However, someone was very shameless. Not full yet? It's okay, I will feed you later. Hey, how could he say such things? I read your storybook just now. It's quite interesting. Let's try it. Pang Zhijing's thoughts of struggling were disrupted by him. Try what? Lu Xing undid Cui Ying's belt. With a swish, her belt was undone. Pang Zhijing took off her fiery red wedding dress. With that, her clothes were stripped off. Pang Zhijing, he kissed her delicate lips. His warm lips directly covered hers. Pang Zhijing, oh, Xiaohou's lips curved into a smile. With a wave of his hand, layers of light muslin fell, blocking the light from outside and also blocking the scene inside. The red quilt flipped like waves, endless affection, not a moment of rest. Chapter 1708. When Pang Zhijing woke up, it was close to evening. She blankly looked at the red canopy above her head. Only then did she remember what had happened. She wanted to get up, but her entire body was sore. It took a while for her to recover. She angrily scolded the culprit in her heart, but her cheeks were red. At this time, she was the only one left in the hall. She didn't know where he had gone. She thought he was busy again. She changed her clothes and prepared to go out. Before she stepped over the threshold, she heard the sound of children's voices not far away. She tilted her head and listened for a while. Her lips curved as she walked out. The heavy snow had stopped at an unknown time. The world was bright and was no longer so dark. The eaves, the branches, and the ground were all covered in white snow. It made the entire imperial palace even brighter. The laughter came from under the plum tree in the courtyard. She followed the sound and saw two figures, one big and one small, moving there. The big one was wearing an inky blue brocade robe embroidered with complicated gold thread patterns. There was a jade pendant at her waist and a pair of black gold boots on her feet. Other than that, she didn't have any other accessories. But even with such simple clothing, she was still a scene that people couldn't look away from. The small one was wearing a joyous red robe with a fox fur around her neck. She looked strong and very joyful. The big one's hands groped in the snow for a while and made a large snowball. She placed it on an even larger snowball on the ground. The shape of a snowman began to take shape. The small one bent over to make the snowball and occasionally ordered the big one to make the snowman. Nyang Nyang, are you going to find His Majesty and the little princess? The female official who was attending to the side asked with a smile. The female official hadn't been in the palace for long. This new emperor and empress was the first master she served. She hadn't thought that the emperor would give up his status and personally make a snowman for the little princess because of a joke. This was probably the first time in the imperial family in the last 180 years to see this. There were many people who wanted to curry favor with the emperor. As long as they moved their lips, the entire courtyard would be filled with snowmen. However, the emperor had made it himself. It could be seen that the rumors outside were true. The emperor loved this little princess very much, but he loved the beautiful empress in front of her even more. Pang Zhijing looked at the two of them in a daze. When she heard this, she smiled and waved her hand. They're having fun. I won't join in the fun. Otherwise, when he saw her come out later, he would ask her if she was cold, quickly go back to the hall, don't be exposed to the wind, and say that her bones were weak. She had heard so much that she could recite it, okay? The female official didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she ordered someone to bring a chair over and cover it with a thick fox fur coat. She also ordered someone to prepare a hand warmer so that her master wouldn't catch a cold. This master had a good temper and wouldn't fuss about it, but his majesty would punish them. Pang Zhijing sat on the chair and quietly looked at the two people who were having so much fun. A wanton smile appeared on his usually gentle and elegant face. He was making a snowman while talking to his daughter. His face was full of unbridled joy. She still remembered that when they first met, he looked gentle and refined on the surface, but inside, he was full of evil tricks. Later, he threatened her, treated her coldly, and used her. Although he did not reveal his hatred for his enemies, she could often feel the evil aura floating around him. At that time, she knew that he wasn't someone she could get close to, but for some reason, he had an attractive force that made her unable to resist walking towards him. After so many years, she rarely thought about the past. First, it was because she had been lying on the sickbed for nearly 2/3 of her time. Second, after she woke up, her thoughts were all on the little ball. When she returned to his side, she only cared about reuniting with him. Now, she saw that his evil aura had disappeared and was replaced by true gentleness. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. Only then did she suddenly understand why she was so obsessed with him. Back then, he often had a smile on his face, but there was no warmth in his smile. It was like a mask to protect himself or confuse others. In his eyes, she saw the loneliness of the sea of stars, the gloominess without light. It was like standing on a lonely mountain with an empty cliff behind it. Her heart was moved. She wanted to add a touch of light to his sea of stars, no longer the gloomy black and white. She wanted to rub his face and tell him not to smile if he didn't want to. She wanted to stand behind him and tell him that he was no longer alone. Originally, she wanted to get close to him, but later on, it was already too late for her to withdraw. When they first met, he saved her. When she ran away, he saved her again. Later on, she didn't know why, but every time she made a mistake, she didn't worry about being punished. Because she was sure that he would clean up the mess for her. From liking him to falling in love with him, it was just a few steps away. Now, she finally achieved her wish. His eyes were filled with a brilliant river of stars and flowers blooming in the warmth of spring. He was no longer lonely. The blooming of the flowers of the mountain was so beautiful. The little ball's soft voice sounded by his ear. "Imperial Father, I'll give you a small branch. That way, the snowman will have hands." "Okay." "Imperial Father, can I wrap the snowman in a fox fur coat? I'm afraid it will be cold at night." Xiao Ho lowered his head to look at the little darling's large watery eyes and chuckled. "Okay. Imperial Father, you're amazing. You're amazing too." As Pang Zhijing listened, she felt sleepy again and her entire body became drowsy. On the other side, after Xiao Ho finished building the snowman, he turned to touch the little darling's face. It was still warm, so he felt relieved. He pulled her hand to his neck to warm it up. "Imperial Father, the little ball isn't cold." Her hand had just touched the snow and it was cold. Xiao Ho smiled but didn't say anything. When her hand was warm, he took the small heater from the palace servant and stuffed it into her hand. "Imperial Father's skin is thick and isn't afraid of the cold. You're still young, so you need to take care of yourself. Otherwise, your mother will be worried." The little ball thought that she had come out to build the snowman behind her mother's back and immediately smiled mischievously. "I know." Xiao Ho touched her face, then led her back. He didn't expect to see the person sitting under the eaves with a smile like a flower. "It's over, your mother saw it." Xiao Ho rubbed his nose. The little ball immediately deflated like a balloon. "Then what should we do? Why don't the little ball take the initiative to admit her mistake?" Xiao Hoxin thought that if little rascal wanted to stop them, he would have opened his mouth a long time ago. He wouldn't have sat there for a long time. But seeing the cute side of little rascal, he wanted to tease him a little. It seems like that's the only way. The little ball was still in high spirits just now. Why did she suddenly become listless? Pang Zhijing was a little puzzled. Seeing the two people getting closer, she couldn't help but stand up. However, she didn't stand firm. Her vision turned black and she fell to the side. When Xiao Ho saw this, he immediately went forward and held the unconscious person in front of the female official. His expression was flustered. Quickly summoned the imperial physician. The little ball at the side was frightened. She had angered her mother until she fainted. Chapter 1709. With the emperor's summons, the entire imperial hospital was summoned. They all held their breaths as they waited outside. Even though the fire in the hall was burning brightly, the imperial physicians were all covered in cold sweat. Even though the cold wind was blocked outside, the emperor sitting in the hall was emitting cold air. It was colder than the wind in the middle of winter. They originally thought that there were only these three masters in the inner palace, so they could happily eat melon seeds and shake their legs. They didn't think that once something happened, they could lose their lives. Seeing this situation, if there was any problem with the empress' body, the entire imperial hospital would be buried with her. Thinking of this, the imperial physicians felt their bodies become even colder. Xiao Ho still hadn't recovered from the scene just now. In front of him was still the scene of little rascal with her eyes closed. He couldn't help but think of that year at the edge of the cliff when she broke free from his hand and disappeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. The fear of that time once again came to his heart. He couldn't control the panic in his heart as he tightly gripped the armrest of the chair. His gaze landed on the person lying silently on the bed. In the eyes of outsiders, his expression was calm, but only he knew that his heart was in chaos. Little Ball was curled up by his leg. No matter how the palace maids tried to persuade her, she wouldn't leave. Father Emperor, Mother Empress will be fine, right? Little Ball will be good in the future and won't make Mother Empress angry again. Xiao Ho lowered his head to look at his daughter who was holding back her tears. His heart ached. He raised a hand to cover her head and softly said, "Your Mother Empress will be fine." At this time, three of the most respected imperial physicians of the imperial hospital were standing in front of Pang Zhijing's bed. In order to prevent a wrong diagnosis, the three of them took turns to take her pulse. The first imperial physician trembled as he reached out to put his hand on her wrist. He thought that if something happened to the empress, he probably wouldn't be able to live. But when he calmed down and calmly made a diagnosis, light flashed through his eyes. He quickly stood up. "I don't dare make a diagnosis. You two take a look." The second imperial physician saw this and his heart turned cold. He thought that it was some incurable disease and went to take the pulse with a death wish. But the result was that his eyes lit up and he pulled over the other imperial physician, "Take a look." The third imperial physician didn't understand, but he didn't dare delay. He quickly sat down and took the pulse. A moment later, joy appeared on his face. The three looked at each other and saw joy in each other's eyes. They turned and knelt in front of the emperor. "Congratulations, Your Majesty, congratulations, Your Majesty, the Empress is pregnant." The three of them shouted in unison, their loud voices echoing through the silent hall, causing Xiao Ho's mind to tremble. "As long as little scoundrel is fine, as long as little scoundrel is fine." He strode forward to look at her, but halfway through, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. "What were you talking about?" This was a joyous occasion. The grand physician gained confidence and was no longer alarmed. He said with a smile, "Your Majesty, the Empress is already more than a month pregnant. Our Shi Xian is going to welcome another young master." Xiao Ho felt as if he had been smashed by these words, and was unable to contain his joy. "Good, good, good, you will be heavily rewarded." When the imperial physicians heard the good news, they were all excited and happy. Pang Zhijing felt like she had a very long dream, so she couldn't tell what time it was when she woke up. She opened her eyes. The hall was a bit dark. It looked like the sky was already dark. She felt her throat was a bit dry and pursed her lips to drink some water. At this time, a cup of warm water was brought to her lips. She didn't refuse and drank it. After drinking it, she came back to life. She blinked and turned her head. She saw Xiao Ho standing by her bed with a cup in his hand. She was scared. She wasn't scared because he appeared and disappeared like a ghost, but because of the silly smile on his face. It was like he had won 5 million, like he had received some treasure. Anyway, it wasn't his usual yuppie style. What's wrong with you? Was he stimulated by something? However, the answer she got was a tight hug. She almost couldn't breathe from the hug. When she wanted to ask him what was wrong with him, he gave her the answer. Big baby, I'm going to be a father again. That joy was so strong that it couldn't be ignored. Become a father? Did that mean she was going to be a mother again? Pang Zhijing was in a daze in his arms, followed by a heart full of joy. At this time, Xiaohou had already let go of her. He looked down and saw her touching her belly with a loving and gentle expression. He couldn't help but reach out and place his hand on the back of her hand. That was the child she was pregnant with. Pang Zhijing looked up to say something to him, but she was covered in kisses. After they separated, Xiaohou hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "When you fainted, I was very scared." Pang Zhijing finally remembered what happened under the roof. She felt guilty and leaned into his arms. "I made you worry." Xiaohou kissed her hair. His heart had been hanging high up in the air until the imperial physician announced the good news. Only then did he feel relieved. "At that time, I was thinking that if anything happened to you, I would go and accompany you." Pang Zhijing's eyes reddened when she heard this. She tried hard not to let her tears fall. "Don't forget that you are the emperor." "So what if I'm the emperor? If you don't have a wife, what's the point of having a country?" He had thought about it. If she left, he didn't want anything. He didn't want his home, he didn't want his country, he didn't want the world. He would accompany her to the ends of the earth, heaven, and hell. "That won't happen. I will accompany you for the rest of my life." She cupped his face and planted a heavy kiss on his cheek. Xiaohou held her head and kissed her back deeply. After a while, little Leather Ball ran in. Imperial Mother, what is a child?" After knowing that Imperial Mother was fine, little Leather Ball's face was full of smiles. She couldn't help but ask when she thought of what the palace servants said. The little doll was full of curiosity and spoke like a child. Pang Zhijing took her hand and said with a smile, "It means that little Leather Ball will be an older sister in the future." Little Leather Ball's eyes widened and she looked around. Where? Pang Zhijing placed her hand on her belly, which was still very flat, and said in a warm voice, "The baby is still in Imperial Mother's belly. It will be able to come out and greet you in 9 months. Little Leather Ball made a "wow" sound and carefully touched it. Then, she seemed to have made a very big decision. Little Leather Ball will be a good older sister. She would give all the delicious food, fun things, and beautiful things to the baby. She would protect the baby, take care of the baby, and not let anyone bully it. Xiaohou watched this warm and cozy scene and his heart was as soft as water. His entire body felt warm. He began to calculate in his heart. Little rascal had been raised in the palace for a year, so his body was more or less recovered. He didn't need those medicinal herbs anymore, so this throne was useless to